Okay, if we can have everybody take their seats, we can get started. Okay. Okay, good evening. I'm going to call to order the VTA Board of Directors meeting of Thursday, March 7th, 2019. Okay, so the first item that we're going to take care of is a very happy item. We have a new board member joining us tonight, City of Gilroy Council Member Marie Blankley, who will serve as the alternate member for Group 4 South County. So Marie will please come forward and stand from the dais so that our board secretary, Elaine Balto, can administer the oath of office. Welcome, Marie. Okay, so next we have our roll call. Elaine, can you please call the roll?
Alternate Board Member Blankley. She's here. Ex officio Board Member Bruins. Board Member Carr. Board Member Carrasco. Board Member Cortese. Alternate Board Member Davis. Board Member Dieppe. Alternate Board Member Ellenberg. Alternate Board Member Fine. Alternate Board Member Hendricks. Board Member Jones. Board Member Liccardo. Board Member McAllister. Alternate Board Member Miller. Board Member Perales. Board Member Rennie. Board Member Tran. Vice Chairperson Chavez. Chairperson O'Neill.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, that'll take us to item 1.4, orders of the day. I want to note that agenda item 2.5, resolution of commendation for Steve Heminger, who is retiring as the executive director of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, is at your place and on the public table. Also in your reading folder and on the public table is revised agenda item number 6.5, contract award for the strategic plan for advancing high-capacity transit corridors, which has been revised to reflect the removal of the word negotiate in the recommendation language. So other than that, staff has no recommended changes. Are there any changes from my board colleagues? Any comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so thank you. So that takes us to awards and commendations. So before we present the awards, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second for item 2.5, resolution of commendation for Steve Heminger upon his retirement as the executive director of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Mr. Heminger is unable to join us tonight. So is there a motion and a second to approve the resolution? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. So item 2.1 is the recognition for the 2018 Employees of the Year. Ibrahim Fukira will read the biographies of the awardees.
Thank you. Our first honoree this evening is Mimi Nguyen. Mimi Nguyen, Office and Timekeeping Technician at the Cerrone office, is the Administration Employee of the Year in the Administrative Supervisor category. Last month marked Ms. Nguyen's 22-year anniversary with VTA. In that time, she has continuously worked towards ensuring that VTA provides excellent customer service and shown that the organization cares about the community it serves. In the past few years, she has helped VTA reach record levels of donations for numerous charity drives. And she managed to do this while staying on top of all her duties at the Cerrone office. Her colleagues are excited to see such a deserving person be recognized. Congratulations to Mimi Nguyen, the Administration Employee of the Year. Our second honoree this evening is Harinder Paul Singh. Harinder Paul Singh, coach operator at Shibuya Operations, is the Operations Award winner of the year in the Operations Maintenance category. In his 12 years at VTA as a bus operator, Mr. Singh has done an exceptional job. He is always willing to lend a helping hand, both to his coworkers and external customers. Mr. Singh does his best to ensure his passengers reach their destination by being mindful of upcoming connections, and he does this all with a great attitude. He is held in high regard by everyone who has witnessed the outstanding service he provides, and it is clear he takes pride in his work. Congratulations to Harinder Paul Singh, the Operations Employee of the Year.
So I'm going to item 2.2, and this is in special recognition of two VTA employees, Juan Baeza and Michael Grenz. If they could come forward. Are you here? Yes. We want to celebrate you. Come on up. Bring your families. Yeah. And you're welcome to bring your families. Bring your families if you'd like. Tonight we're proud to recognize, oh, look at you. We're proud to recognize the quick thinking actions of two VTA bus operators, Juan Baeza and Michael Grenz, who went above and beyond the call of duty. Juan and Michael, and your families, I'm glad you're up here. These men played critical roles that led to the arrest of a man wanted by the FBI in multiple states for tampering with food products. Last month, Mr. Baeza noticed a passenger on his bus in Sunnyvale spreading an unknown substance. The substance turned out not to be dangerous, but no one knew that at the time. Mr. Baeza had his passengers get off the bus and called the Sheriff's Transit Patrol. The passenger who spread the substance then ran off. After OCC alerted our other bus operators to be on the lookout, Mr. Grenz then spotted the suspect about an hour later and alerted the Transit Patrol, and the passenger was caught and arrested. The actions by these operators is a testament to our ongoing commitment to our safety and our motto of see something, say something. And I would just add, they did something. Because so many of our employees are in daily contact with the public, they are in a crucial position to be able to support the work of law enforcement, including our partners at the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. I'm delighted that Sheriff Lori Smith is here tonight for this special recognition. Please join me in giving both Juan, Michael, and all of the Transit Patrol a big round of applause. And I just want to say thank you to the sheriff for being here. And we should have had you come up. What were you standing back there for? Is Johnny here? So Johnny, no, he's not. You have to be present to win. He doesn't get his commendation. Okay. So, what's that? I think, let me finish all the awards and then we'll let you come on up. We have one more, and that is in honor of we're going to go to 2.4 if that's okay. And this is VTA's Community Partnership Recognition to the Family Supportive Housing. And what I'd like to ask is their board chair, Megan Powers, to join Nuria and Teresa. If you could come forward. Family Supportive Housing operates the San Jose Family Shelter and provides single and two-parent families in need with shelter, child care, health care services, counseling, money management, employment referrals, and the other services to help parents return to self-sufficiency. What has been especially meaningful and rewarding for VTA staff is the experience they've had over the past several years volunteering during the holidays, setting up the annual holiday shop. VTA employees help transform a parking garage into a winter wonderland where children and parents can shop for each other. We honor the contributions of the staff of Family Supportive Housing, volunteers, and the volunteers who are critical to ensuring local families are supported through adversity and challenging times and helping them get to a path of independence and success. Thank you for being such a wonderful partner. Let's give them a round of applause. And then we can take public comment. And if we could have Mr. LeBron, if you could come forward.
It's going to be very brief. And what I want to do is to bring to the board's attention that none of this would have happened with an autonomous vehicle.
So item 3 is public comment. This is the space in our agenda for those who wish to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda but that is within our jurisdiction. You will have 2 minutes to speak. I encourage those with customer service concerns to contact our customer service department after you make your comments. The contact information is up on the screen. So the first person is Angie Dixon, to be followed by Mr. Whiteman, to be followed by Monica Mallon.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Angie Dixon. I'm an ISR at VTA, Customer Service. I've been here with VTA for 18 and a half years, and I love my job. All the people that call in looking for how to get from point A to point B, I help them. Also the people with complaints and concerns, and also the ones that want to give compliments. Over the years, my basic inclination is not only to help these people answer their questions, but also educate them in how the bus runs, how the buses work, how the program runs, how the program works. And it's been my pleasure to feel that I have done a good job in that capacity, because I always have people saying, oh, you're that nice lady that did this, or oh, you're that nice lady that did that. But then I've had a couple people hang up on me because they don't like what I say. But that's okay. That's part of the role. But my concern tonight is the changes that are going to be coming up when you put in the new services next fall. The overnight 22 has to stay. There's so many people that use that bus, not just the homeless, but the people that need to get to work or get home from work. And the homeless are people too. They're human beings, they pay their fare, and they should have a place to go when there's nowhere else to go. Also, the routes that are being taken away or shortened in the areas where disabled and seniors live, they need to stay or be better, because you cannot expect a senior to walk a mile to a mile and a quarter to get to a bus, whether they are in a chair, have a walker, or the disabled. A lot of them don't have motorized wheelchairs. So it's very important that they have a place they've been used to getting on the bus to go where they need to go. Access paratransit is nice, but that costs $8 a day, and a lot of them cannot afford that. And I thank you very much for listening. Have a good evening.
When I begin. Yes, when is, I heard the BART is coming down here to November 2nd. Is that first or second, or sometime in November? Yeah, also, when I was on light rail on February 11th, I saw a fight between two passengers when I got up, so I called the security office. And what are we going to do to speed up light rail? When are you guys going to put in fencing downtown and when are we going to start the fencing project? I don't know when that's going to be. And when is BART coming here? Oh, I think what you guys should do before BART comes here is extend the CCTV system on the Great Mall and Montague light rail stations.
Monica Mallon, followed by Jake Tonko and Andrew Boone.
My name is Monica Mallon. I'm a student at SJSU, and I'm a resident of Cambrian Park. And as I've mentioned in my other public comments so far this year, I'm against the 90-10 plan. I'm against the cuts. I get that bringing BART to downtown San Jose is going to get a lot of cars off the road. It's going to be better for the environment. But you don't just represent all of those people that are commuting into San Jose. You represent the people that live here right now. We should be able to have transit service. You know, I don't take your services because I want to. I take them because I have to. I have no other options right now. I just can't afford it. I've dealt with hours between buses, and that's better than nothing. So just please consider keeping these routes at least at peak so that people can have the option to go places. You know, I've supported high-speed rail. I've supported electrified Caltrain. I've voted for every single transportation measure. This is just not fair. How are we supposed to use things like high-speed rail and Caltrain if we can't even get from our houses to there because the lots fill up before 7 a.m.? Also, I just want to ask that all of you use your services if you aren't already. Take the light rail, take the buses, take routes 65 and 13, take the 22 overnight. Talk to your riders and see what this plan will do to them. And just really listen to their stories and see them as people before you make all of these cuts. Thank you.
So after Andrew Boone will be rolling the brawn, but we have Mr. Tonkel.
Do I have to hit this? No, it just works automatically. Awesome. Again, I'm one of the many people up here hoping that you guys will save Bus 22, save Bus 54. I had the fortunate experience to be a part of the people that were demonstrating last night and actually get an opportunity to use Bus 22. There are people that need that bus, and it's really heartbreaking to know that when I got off after going to Palo Alto and all the way back, that I got to go home to my bed, sleep a few hours before going to work, and I get that these buses aren't temporary, long-term solutions. But in order for us to accommodate what we need to do now for the homeless crisis that we have, for the social services that we need to invest in the future, it's important that we keep these lines open. In terms of switching to a 90-10 plan, I'm of the generation that's going to be stuck in even worse traffic than we have now, getting to and from work, the generation that's going to be dealing with climate change, and you can't incentivize riders when you're forcing them onto lines that are only open because they have ridership already. We have to invest at this point in our community, invest in our transportation so that we can reduce our fossil fuels, not waiting 5 years for BART, but today. Thank you.
After Roland will be Cole Cameron.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Boone. I live on Stockton Avenue here in San Jose. I direct a nonprofit volunteer advocacy group called I Walk, I Bike, I Vote, and I sent you a PDF letter, I believe today or yesterday, on the very important need to continue running Bus 22 service overnight. And the simple reason is because it's the only bus running overnight in Santa Clara County. So eliminating it eliminates the entire public transit system, and that's a different kind of cutback than anything else on the table. That cuts out trips not just in Santa Clara County for people to get to work and to get to school and to get to entertainment. You do know that people stay out past 1 a.m. every day of the week. This is San Jose. This is an urban center, and it's not actually like San Mateo County, for example. We have bigger, larger urban centers that are all connected by Bus 22, downtown Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, San Jose, East San Jose, that all of those places support a lot of jobs, that you have to travel early hours to get to, like myself. I used to live in Palo Alto. I had to travel to San Jose for work, and my shift ended such that the only way to get home to Palo Alto was on Bus 22. And I appreciate unhoused people riding the bus, and there's absolutely no reason to consider cuts, this cut or that cut, based on someone's housing situation. This is a reason not to cut Bus 22. And my own personal opinion is I like riding the bus with unhoused people because they tend to be asleep. Those are the riders not making any noise. Other people are playing music. This is what you want, more riders. This is a high ridership route. It needs to be preserved by making some other cutback, like bus service to Levi Stadium, or express routes from the suburbs, or bus service to Berryessa BART. Thank you very much.
Mr. LeBron, and then after Cole Cameron, and then Blair Beekman.
So what I'd like to do is share with you my experience getting home the night an individual decided to hijack a UPS truck, and the City of San Jose PD basically had to shut down the area around Trimble, which involved shutting down the light rail line. And my experience is that two things happened. Is number one, the entire light rail system melted down. It just stopped. I was watching these light rails and they were not going anywhere. And I was at the bus stop at River Oaks, and we were told, actually I was told by VTA staff, wait there because we got the bus bridge coming on. So I waited, and a 56 bus went by. I got no idea where 56 goes. Google was no help because the Google was telling me the light rail didn't know it had melted down. And after 56 went by, it was at least 30, 40 minutes I'd been there. A bus came by from the bridge. It was absolutely packed to the rafters. There's no way for any of us to get onto it. And when the next 56 went by an hour later, I said, okay, that's it, I'm out of here. So to the 56, which took me towards El Camino Real, and within a couple of miles, Google said, okay, Buster, this is how I'm going to get you home. But there's two things I think we should have seen better. The drivers were telling, oh, were they calling out for people overtime? Do you know what? All the drivers were busy driving buses. But the problem was we were driving empty buses while there were probably hundreds, if not thousands of people trying to use this bus bridge. So my suggestion moving forward is when you get buses that intersect with the bridge is to reroute them during the emergency to actually provide the bus service and then eventually resume back their normal route. I really wish somebody would look into that as a future improvement. Thank you very much. And also figure out what happened to the light rail.
Cole Cameron, followed by Blair Bickman, followed by Gary.
Good evening, Board. Dave Cortese, thank you for joining us Monday night at our Cambrian Community Council. I am their chair of that neighborhood. We have probably about 2,000 people on our mailing list, and we touch over 20,000 people on Nextdoor. And from that gathering of great neighbors, we are interested in working with you, as I have with Brandy and other staff members, to come up with some kind of a solution with route number 65 that, as was mentioned earlier, touches not only our neighborhood but also San Jose State. So we're hoping that we can retain at least the morning and evening ridership areas until we have the various developments in our area expand our population so we have that ridership need met and hitting some of the baselines. You know, as a finance guy, I understand budgets, and I just want to work with and see what we can come up with as a joint solution here. So thank you for your time this evening, and I appreciate the possibility to get a common solution to this situation. Thank you.
Mr. Beekman, followed by Gary, followed by Scott Lorgan.
Hi, thank you. A thank you to the VTA for bringing the idea of the disruption process to the open public committee process this time last year. We all should be understanding we have to consider economic disruptions and recessions not only for the next 15 years, not just for the next few years, but for the next 10 to 15 years. Our lives are going to go through a possible radical change in the question of the future of fracked gasoline and individual automobile use. This demands of ourselves to be thoughtful, to go slow, and to create peaceful, responsible, safe practices for a new era and the ideas of community sustainability. And to use the ideas of care. So economic models will not hurt anyone or leave people behind. We're entering a new era of peace and community sustainability. I hope we can practice these ideals. To speak to the VTA board here, I have been attending VTA meetings for about a year now. I am a bit one-dimensional, but I try my darndest to follow the rules and good procedures. Having space where we can openly, publicly question each other is important. I would like to ask, I hope this can be a time to begin to better trust my judgment how I want to speak about issues at public comment. I would like very much to discuss items with the people of VTA and what can be appropriate to openly talk about at the public comment process, if possible. Thank you.
We have Gary, followed by Scott Lorgan, followed by Nassim Nouri.
Madam Chairman, honorable members of the board, I represent the Sunnyvale Clients Collaborative, which is an association of the clients served by the North County Cold Weather Shelter located on Ross Drive in Sunnyvale. The new proposed 2019 transit plan being floated for consideration lists terminating the Line 54 completely. We are completely opposed to this solution, and I'd like to tell you why. We seriously and strongly urge the board to consider the impact termination would have on the 125 plus current clients at the cold weather shelter who depend, many of them solely on the Line 54 to reach the shelter in the morning or in the evening and away from the shelter in the morning. These carry people to the Lackey Transit Center, the Sunnyvale Transit Center, El Camino Real, and Stevens Creek Boulevard. Many of these clients, many of whom have jobs and some with children, have no other means of transportation. Terminating Line 54 would cause an undue hardship on everyone who uses the 54 there, but particularly on these folks. The nearest bus service other than 54 is at Lockheed, the transit center, which is more than half a mile from Ross. And clients would have to come in there either by light rail or 26 line and walk to the shelter. Many of these clients have mobility issues, and cannot walk that distance. At the very least, we urge you to retain the Sum 54 service in the evening and the morning to serve the shelter, perhaps replacing it with a community bus, which would be a more economical solution. Please note that the County Board of Supervisors has already funded expansion of the shelter from 125 to 175 clients, and the construction for that is currently underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Lorgan, then Ms. Nuri, and then Joyce O'Neill.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Scott Largent. One night when I was at City Hall, I stayed there pretty late for a meeting, and normally I take the 23 or the 323. Cell phone had died. It was pouring rain. I was waiting at the bus stop. Car came by. I mean, it was just a horrible day. I got drenched out in front of there. It was all bad. And then I realized that the 23 didn't run past 1 in the morning. I started to walk down, trying to take Stevens Creek back. Then I cut back downtown, and I mean, I was freezing. It was really bad. And then this 22 pulled up. The most random thing happened. It wasn't even the bus stop. Pulled up, door opens, said, "Hey, get on in here. You need to get in here. You need to stay warm." And I was literally like shaking. I mean, it was a weird experience to having gone through. I didn't know much about the 22. I didn't know much about the 522. Recently, I started taking the bus to Palo Alto. I really like talking with the bus drivers. That's been a big support group for me for the last 3.5 years of my sobriety. You guys cannot cut this bus. The people that need this right now, they need it to get to work, to get to drug treatment, to get to counseling, and they also need it to stay warm. They need shelter late at night. And the other really sad thing is a lot of women don't want to go to the homeless shelters. They don't want to go in the encampment. They're worried about being attacked, sexually assaulted, raped. And these bus drivers are they're like angels. I mean, just the way they load everybody onto that bus and they keep them warm. And I mean, I was on one night and they had shopping carts and wheelchairs and blankets, and it was the most humane thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And this one gal, this kind of little cute blonde girl, was the bus driver, and she's driving this 80-foot long bus, and she's just getting everybody on there. And that was really, really impressive. And I was hoping she'd be here tonight, and she's one of your good employees. She drives the 522 80-foot long bus, but this service has helped me a lot through my sobriety. Thank you. Thank you.
So Ms. Nuri, followed by Ms. O'Neill, and if there's anybody else that wishes to speak, please get in line.
Hi, thank you very much for having this opportunity for all the riders of Line 22 to be here and urge you collectively to please keep it open. I think I'm having a hard time understanding why this line needs to shut down. I understand the cost issue. However, this is a time where San Jose's Climate Smart Plan is kicking in. We are excited about getting more and more people onto our public transport. It is not the time to actually be shutting any of these lines down, particularly one that's the only option between 1 and 4 a.m. There are people who need to make it early to the city, to far destinations for work, and this is a connective line that actually helps them get there. So at a time where we really need to push people into using the public transport we have, expand the public transport, and go with solutions that help us actually address the climate issue, please keep this line open. This is a very far distant reason for keeping it open than what you've already heard. The number one priority of you as our representative is to keep your constituents safe and to keep us in an environment that we can survive. And you've heard the survival that depends on keeping a bus like this open. Do I want you to build enough affordable housing and housing for the homeless? Yeah, that would be ideal. But at a time where the city has not been able, or the county has not been able to provide enough of that shelter for people who are in danger every night, not just because it's cold, not just because it's hot, but for a wide variety of reasons, this really is a terrible time for you to consider taking that minimum shelter away from folks that need it for 4 hours a night. So I urge you to keep this line open. And in the context of or long-term plans, please think about the climate as well. Thank you.
Hi. I'm a customer of paratransit, and I'm very grateful for that service. And recently, it was about a month ago, they started decreasing the service because they were cutting bus routes and schedules for buses. And the two are totally different services, because the people who are using paratransit, like myself, aren't able to use a lot of times the buses and the light rails and BART and all that. And without this service, we're not able to be a part of the community like undisabled people are. And so now, if I live on White Road and that bus stops running, I can't get home if I go anywhere. And some people are totally housebound on weekends and can't get to jobs because the buses don't go there. I personally am willing to pay the extra amount for the extended service, and they cut that out too. So I'm here to represent all the people like me who really depend on this service for our well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Please come forward. Okay, okay, oh, okay.
I first learned about the 22 when I would take it home when I worked for the world's largest financial printer down in Palo Alto as a proofreader. Now I know about the 22 as an advocate. Most of you know me because I hound you constantly about unhoused issues and housing issues. The 22 has become the best shelter that we have. It has security, it has good lighting, it has cameras, you don't sleep on the floor, it's safe for LGBT folks, it's safe for women, it's safe for seniors. It's the best housing that we have going right now. It really is. And that's kind of a shame that it's our best shelter. It shouldn't be our best de facto shelter, but it is. It's also that we can't cut it because it's keeping people alive. We're not building new shelters right now. We're not building new navigation centers. And that's really kind of a failure. If we cut this, more people are going to die. 157 people died on our streets last year. And one of the leading causes was pneumonia. More people are going to die of pneumonia because they're out in the elements. We can't do this. We just can't kill more people. I also work with the Sunnyvale shelter, and people there are going to lose out because the 54 is going to be cut. We have to look at why we're cutting services to the unhoused people. The express from the Gilroy shelter is also being cut. What is the common thread between these? Why are we doing this? We're cutting services to senior centers. Why are we doing this? We have to look at why we're cutting services to our most vulnerable people. What does it say about us as a society? It says that we're not serving these people. We need to look at this. We need to look at the cuts that we're making. There's 25 properties that VTA can sell that they can better utilize. Why can't we do this? Why are we making decisions to hurt our most vulnerable population? And as I asked last night, what do we want? 22. When do we want it? All night. What do we want? 22. When do we want it? All night.
Thank you for your comments. We don't have any public hearing items on tonight's agenda, so we'll now move to item 5, committee reports. First item is number 5.1, Citizens Advisory Committee Chair Report, which is in the reading folder and public binder. Next item is 5.2, Policy Advisory Committee Chair Report, and this will be provided by Glenn Hendricks.
Hello, I'm Glenn Hendricks, Sunnyvale City Council member, alternate VTA board member, and as you're about to hear, I'm the newly elected chairperson of the PAC. So our February 14th meeting, we unanimously voted myself as the chairperson. City Cupertino Councilmember Darcy Paul is now the vice chair. We distributed the remaining commemorative checks for cities that weren't able to attend the ceremony for it. We recommended the VTA board approve the draft framework for the proposed 2016 Measure B Innovative Transit Service Modules. We had a robust discussion about the transit speed policy for VTA, and I think the short answer is we're all in favor of finding ways to make the transit services move faster. We received an update on the development of the 2019 New Transit Service Plan. Again, there was a robust discussion with very interesting comments about what was happening with South County service, as well as all the proposed service cuts. There was no consensus from us on what the changes that we would recommend. There was one recommendation that as VTA gives those presentations, as it's given to us, it just went right into kind of what the service cut changes are. And the recommendation is to always start the presentation with the financial picture of what are the reasons that are causing us to take a look at those changes. And then we also discussed the countywide pedestrian and bicycle education plan. So we're looking forward to being able to continue to give great policy advice.
Thank you very much, Glenn. So next, that takes us to item 5.3, Standing Committee Chairperson's Report, and Board Member Perales will report on the meeting of the Congestion Management Program and Planning Committee.
Hi. Good evening. The Congestion Management Program and Planning Committee met on February 21st and recommended approval for items 6.2 and 6.3 on tonight's consent agenda. A summary of the committee's comments are in the staff report. We also discussed the draft countywide pedestrian and bicycle education and encouragement program activities and received an update on the development of the 2019 New Transit Service Plan. And we also elected Board Member McAllister as our new Vice Chairperson for the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perales. Board Member Carr will report on the meeting of the Administration and Finance Committee.
Thank you. The Administration and Finance Committee met as a committee of the whole on February 21st. Since we met as a committee of the whole, we forwarded without recommendation items 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5 on tonight's consent agenda. We also heard item 7.1, which is on tonight's regular agenda. The committee's comments are in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Chavez, who is the committee vice chair, will report on the meeting of the Safety, Security, and Transit Planning and Operations Committee.
Thank you. We discussed items 6.2 and 6.3 on tonight's consent agenda, and that's the transit speed policy for VTA and the draft framework of the proposed 2016 Measure B Innovative Transit Models Competitive Grant Program. We also received an update on the developments of the 2019 New Transit Service Plan and received reports on marketing, ridership, safety, and security. That's all.
Great, thank you. Board Member Liccardo will report on the meeting of the Capital Program Committee.
The Capital Program Committee had a fabulous meeting on February 28th, 2019. We reviewed and provided input on 3 key items, each of which resulted in robust discussion and questions about, first, the proposed fiscal years 20 and 21 capital budgets, the proposed 2016 Measure B program for the upcoming biennial budget, and a status update on the 2000 Measure A Transit Improvement Program projects. Our next meeting is March 28th, at which we will consider recommending board approval of the biennial capital budgets. And based on the valuable information perspectives provided at the recent Future of Transportation workshop, we will be reviewing both traditional and potential alternate approaches, including innovative ones, and costs and schedules for delivering the mobility envisioned by the 2000 Measure A ballot for 3 remaining projects: the East Bay to BART Regional Connector, the Vasona Light Rail Extension, and the Airport People Mover to Mineta San Jose International. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And for the Governance and Audit Committee, I'd like to report that we met today, and we recommend that the Board of Directors, number 1, add the employee workforce audit. We're going to change the title of this to FY19 work plan, review and receive the FY 2019 risk assessment refresh, and approve the recommended internal audit work plans for FY 2020 and 2021. These will be forwarded to the April board meeting. which takes us to the State Route 85 Corridor Policy Advisory Board. Chairperson McAllister will provide the report.
Yay, we got funding and we're moving forward. So we can leave the committee report there, but it's, I've been, okay, so we did have a policy advisory board for, on February the 25th, kicking off our next phase and again celebrating funding, which was a great surprise. I mean, not a surprise, but anticipated development to keep us moving forward because this is an important one for a lot of people. The the staff is developing a handful of project alternatives that will be subsequently evaluated at an alternative analysis. BTA staff will develop some basic concepts that will be refined at a workshop consisting of PAB members, city staff, and the public. And then the public and the PAB and staff are committed to moving the project along quickly and hopefully to identify alternatives to study by the end of summer and to complete the alternative analysis by the end of 2019. Some of those alternatives that we were looking at is trying to use the shoulders or the center divides and potentially using a reversible transit lane north of 280 where physical constraints make it hard to go other ways. At the end of the 25 PAB meeting, the PAB reviewed the findings from the first phase of the study, which was a travel market analysis, and indicated a preference to disregard light rail as a project alternative. I don't know about disregard, but we figured that with the prior discussion of the council, from the board of directors and the staff reports concerning light rail, we figured projects and alternatives that would be more in line with cost of building and operating the service and a desire for a more near-term and more flexible transit solution for the corridor. The PAB encouraged staff to take an innovative approach to developing alternative concepts, describing the corridor as a test bed for innovation. We like to think it's going to be a pilot projects. These seem to move along a little quicker than test beds. That could include autonomous transit operations and public-private partnerships. PAB members also expressed an interest in exploring project alternatives that could generate revenue that could sustain transit operations in the corridor. The next steps for the SR 85 Transit Guideway Study are in April, is an April workshop and a May 20th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, we'll move on to item 6, the consent agenda. The consent agenda are items 6.1 through 6.5. Is there any member of the board that wish to, Mr. Carr?
I have a quick question on 6.4.
Proceed.
And with that, I would move approval of the rest of the consent calendar. Do you want me to ask my question now?
Well, if you just have a quick question, why don't you just ask your question now?
Okay, it will require a response from staff. But so 6.4 is a contract for bus stop enhancement at various locations, and I'm wondering, is this just step one in sort of a comprehensive look at bus stops throughout the county, and are other areas of the county going to eventually be seeing improvements as well, and perhaps is there a schedule for that? I see some heads nodding in the back.
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Jim Unitas to address that. And yes, we have undertaken a comprehensive look at all of our existing bus stops, and that's still ongoing, identifying opportunities to combine them, et cetera. This contract is to start doing the enhancements, both any curb cuts, sidewalk improvements, and the shelters. Jim?
Yeah, and these, in 6.4, these are for specific corridors that we've already gotten money for. In the next year's budget, we'll be proposing another set of bus stop improvements, a fairly robust program for other parts of the county. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. McAllister.
Could I ask a question on 6.3?
Certainly.
Okay. So you had a little table, and it mentioned in there innovative mobility models and programs, and there's an 8% allocation, I guess, of proposed funding down there. At our workshop recently, we had a lot of discussion about innovation and being leaders for the area and transportation. In your note here, it says something about the address the first and last mile. Is there going to be coming back something along with Measure A money that would be used for just pure innovation and technology improvements?
we are looking at establishing an innovation program at VTA right now. So hopefully we'll be able to come back with you with some answers to that in the future.
Would that be in our next budget, our upcoming budget process?
We're looking to do that right now. So yes, hopefully we'll see that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, go ahead, please.
I'm just on that exact same item. I got, well, two questions. First, the staff report says pending favorable outcome of the lawsuit. I assume that was the Measure B lawsuit that's been favorably resolved.
That pending can be removed.
Okay, good. And I do just want to ask that question on that same table, and it kind of struck me as odd too. The percentage of 8% for the innovative mobility programs, given everything that we think we want to be looking at and that we want to be doing, is 8% enough? Or is 8% all you could squeeze out?
There's never enough funding. So that's something that's sort of been already vetted through committees before, 8%.
I get that it's been vetted, but we just did the whole innovation workshop, and we had sort of a, who thinks we ought to move forward with more innovative solutions? Like every board member that was there raised their hands. So now he's got to look at this number saying that 8% seems a little dated. Is it the right number? I know you could always use more money, but should we be trying to adjust that now, or do we figure we'll find money someplace else?
Yes. Madam Chair, if I may, as Chris Augenstein, our Director of Planning, indicated, these numbers, these allocations were based on one, priority, two, where the highest demand was for the allocation of funding, and frequent core bus network is very high in that list. I think what is being suggested is that we take a second look at this, but I just want to caution that we arrived at how we allocated the funds based on, one, what our mission is and how we deliver that mission, and we need to provide services, continue providing services. The fare programs, we have made a commitment as staff to fulfill the requirements that the board has put upon us to make sure that our fare programs are equitable and that we continue providing assistance to those who cannot meet the level of fare. So this fare programs needs to remain the way it is, and the bus amenities, as we discussed earlier, are necessary because we've had a lot of feedback from individuals who are elderly and also those who have disabilities in the way that our bus stops, the locations, the lack of shelter, of bus shelter, et cetera. So I would ask that as we have identified this and we're moving forward and have shared this information with all the cities and the county on the allocation of the funds, that we not deviate. What we should do is try to identify other grant funds and other funding sources so that we can do more of the kinds of things that were brought to our attention by the public and by the board when we had our future transportation. I hate to go off the agenda on this, but I think it's so important. We've arrived at this point. There are cities and there are individuals in our community who are looking to these numbers as changes into their ability to continue accessing our services. So we would like to stay the course.
So just a quick question. I know both of you know the answer, right? This is a 2-year out of the 30-year plan, right? And as we look at the priorities in coming years, if some innovation solution came up, these numbers could be adjusted in future budgets. Is that my interpretation of these? So I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking it.
We brought the percentages at the very beginning so that we were clear on how we were going to be allocating funds as they arrived. Unfortunately, and now fortunately, we have access to the funds, right. But there's money there to allocate it. So in fact, once we start apportioning these funds, it's going to be more dollars than what was anticipated in 1 year because we have 2 years of funding available. It's up to the board if it directs us to do a second look and come up with a different allocation or distribution of the percentages. But again, I just want to restate that we arrive at these percentages based on a lot of thoughtful consideration. and the prioritization as we brought to the board and the board supported.
There was a process in the measure that called for if there was going to be a need to alter it, but it would require, I think it was a 3/4 vote of the board.
These
if I recall.
percentages are not part of the measure.
Well, let me talk, can I?
Oh, certainly.
So let me just say one thing about what the percentage that is. So when we crafted the 6.3, what we anticipated to be $6.3 billion, and I will say that I mean this very sincerely when I say this, we only, of that whole budget, we put a whole bunch into capital and we put less than 500 million into operating, and this is a subset of the operating.
Absolutely.
So what I would suggest is that if we're going to have a conversation about the percentages, and I absolutely understand why we would want to consider that, I think that's going to be a bigger discussion about Measure B. I don't think that's going to be a discussion just about one subset of Measure B. And so to your point, yes, the board can do what it likes. 4/5 of the board can be persuaded to take a different, approach. But I think based on the combination of the need to be innovative and the combination to protect those core services is kind of where we're stuck, because a lot of this money is coming out of that single slice of the pie.
I'm convoluted with your response, and I love you to death, but I think that these numbers here are our numbers. The 500 is part of the measure that would take a major board overhaul.
But no, this is
these little sub-percentages of 8%, aren't they something that are derived in our policy?
That's right. But here's what I'm agreeing with you. Like, yes, the answer to that is yes.
I don't think you need to justify. My only thing is I think if a majority wanted to change the percentages, they could change these percentages.
A majority could do that, yes. The only thing
I'm not proposing we make any change. So
the only thing I'm adding to that is that, and it's not an argument, I mean, it's a good discussion to have. I'm not this is not me even a little upset.
I've noticed you upset before.
Yeah, this is not that. No, my only point is that I appreciate you raising it, because I do think we're going to have a very important creative tension around this desire for the board to shift direction and at the same time maintain a certain level of service. And the reason I point out that the $500 million is so little is for operations. Like, that's out of the whole pie. That's the pie we took for operations.
As I recall, it was even smaller till somebody spoke up and helped us see the light.
I wanted $1 billion, so I
know. But it's
anyway,
bigger than it started, and that was thanks to you, Cindy.
Thank you.
I'm okay with this. It was just my issue was the 8% in the backdrop of the discussions we just had about innovative solutions. Now is not the time, given the history of where everything has come from. But someday, if we're going to do something different, we're going to have to look at our priorities.
Duly noted. Duly noted. Member Liccardo, did you wish to add?
Oh, actually, I was going to recuse myself, but I don't believe I need to now.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Wait, I'm coming to you, just so, hold on a second. So do we have a motion on the consent? Okay, so now we do have some members of the public who would like to speak, so I'll call you for. So Andrew, you wanted to speak on 6.2, and Mr. Beekman also wanted to speak on 6.2 and 6.3, and then Andrew wanted to speak on 6.5.
Yes, thank you, Chair O'Neill. My name is Andrew Boone, and I live nearby on Stockton Avenue. And one thing I'd like everyone to get in the habit of, and I thought you were in the habit of this, is since you're all elected officials on city councils, is taking public comment before the discussion of whatever the item is. In this case, taking public comment on the consent calendar before you discuss the consent calendar. Because if you take public comment after, there's no way for you to hear the public comment. You've already discussed the issue, you've already made your decisions, and as an afterthought, after the motion is made to pass the consent calendar, finally, the public gets to say something. It's not in your benefit to push public comment to the bottom of the priorities and violate Robert's Rules of Order. Just follow what you do on your city councils here at the VTA Board of Directors.
Well, if I could just before you go, I just say, so it is our intent, what the model that I'm going to have is that people will ask questions, the board members will ask questions, and then we'll go to the public. This was a little bit out of the ordinary because, you know, we usually don't do that where we have that many questions and comments on consent. Usually we just have people pull a consent item and then we can have that full discussion. So I hear what you're saying, and so our standard practice will be to wait and let the public speak before the final comments are made.
Thank you, Chair O'Neill. On the transit signal priority policy, I do appreciate that VTA has set as a specific goal to increase the speed of transit, but it says in the text something like transit signal priority is outside of the scope of VTA. And I think what that means is that the cities and the state have to actually apply for making a transit signal operate with transit signal priority of the buses. But that doesn't mean that the VTA shouldn't lead an effort to get more signals working that way so that buses have priority. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah. Mr. Beekman?
Thank you for the words of Mr. Boone about the public comment. Thank you for the words from Mr. Boone about the public comment process. It's important for us, important for the process. I'd like to speak on items 6.2 and 6.3, transit speed policy, and the innovative transit service model grant program. About the transit speed policy, this was spoken at the committees last month, and I'm learning, there's two very distinct sides within the BTA, and depending on how you want to work, it's important lessons to learn right now. I am a total beginner at these things, and I am not for speed. I think speed is hurtful. I think people become nervous around speed. So this is going to be a long issue, and the way it was talked about was pretty great, and I totally agree with how it was talked about. And they want to maintain the level where it's at. They don't want to go any lower than where they're at, and I am totally agreeable to that. But to start raising it up is just going to make something so uncomfortable to me. I'd just be interested to know exactly how that process can happen, and I don't know how that can happen. Personally, to be perfectly honest at this time, I believe that the reason part of this slowdown is to possibly open the option in the future for farm animals and animals to be modes of transportation in our future. That possibility is always available to us, as we know, and just a matter to think about it. And I want that thinking openness to be allowed, and doing speed stuff is very uncomfortable. Thank you for the transit stuff that you're working on here to allow people and their fares to be respected. Thank you.
Were you going to speak on 6.3, Mr.?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. I'll just quickly add that about what was just spoken about was a great conversation. I'm really hopeful for everyone that we can talk about issues of fares. And funding for fares is just vital. And in the austerity that your bus line is practicing on ridership right now and routes, it's just thank you, Supervisor Chavez, for what you're offering, and Howard Miller too. I think we're in the ballpark of really talking about how rates can be fair for people, and they have to be. And we have the ways and means to make that possible. And if we don't put our creative energy to make things good for ourselves, then we're not doing our job. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Boone, and then he'll be followed by Mr. Whiteman.
Thank you, Chair O'Neill and directors of the board. My name is Andrew Boone. I live here in San Jose, and regarding item 6.5, strategic plan for advancing high-capacity transit corridors, I'm glad that there's such a plan moving forward in the near future, and I read the list of potential higher capacity transit corridors that are identified. It's a long list because there are ones that were at some time in the past identified for light rail service, some bus rapid transit improvements, and many were not able to proceed, like the bus-only lanes on El Camino Real, which I think is would be a very transformative project, to say the least, for all of Santa Clara County. And part of it was built on Alum Rock, only a short segment, and I know the agency ran into many practical problems with construction, and I would think that it has discouraged you from proceeding with that kind of transformative, bold, bus-only lane type of design. I hope that this plan would be an opportunity to revisit that. Part of it was the public response. So part of it was, what did people say why they don't want a lane converted to a bus lane, or maybe it could be a bus and carpool lane. It's not like we have to stop the process because we got a mixed response and a strong negative response from many members of the community on the first try. We can keep studying how to speed up transit on El Camino Real. My own personal experience is that during the night hours when there isn't traffic congestion, it's much, much faster. 15 to 20 minutes just here, downtown San Jose to downtown Palo Alto. It's like roughly cutting it from 60 to 45 minutes. So that's a major improvement that we need to try to reach someday. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Whiteman?
When are you guys going to get a contract to put fencing in downtown so that people will not cross the fence lines when they're riding light rail? Because sometimes, you know, when the light rail's coming, people just cross over the tracks. I heard you guys were talking about a thing about when we're going to get fence. You guys are going to put some fences down there. Well, that's never been approved. That's never happened. I think you guys were talking about last year about getting some fencing down there. Do you guys have any information on that? Because I put information on somebody's answering machine about that on Tuesday. So nobody gave me any information on that. And about BART. I came to you and said, when is BART coming here? And nobody's talked to me about that.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteman. Okay, so with that, Ms. Bruins?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a comment on 6.2. There was one particular line in the staff report that I feel really strongly about, and it says, ultimately, the success of the policy depends on the ongoing cooperation, support, and partnership between VTA and local jurisdictions or other partners. And I think normally when we do a lot of this, we do outreach, but we do outreach to the jurisdictions on a project level. I think this policy is something that is long overdue, and because it is local jurisdictions that have a lot of control over this, I would like to request that staff consider how we can proactively, early, not wait for a project, but how do we start building the awareness and the education in the local jurisdictions, and going beyond just our single point of contact in terms of our TAC type people to try and raise this, because the policy is really should be raised even to the city manager level.
Mr. Carr, did you want to say anything? Oh, okay, great. Okay, that being done, is all those in favor of passing the consent calendar? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. That takes us to our regular agenda, and the first item is 7.1, is to authorize the general manager to enter into an exclusive negotiations agreement with Green Republic Blossom Hill LLC, a joint venture of Republic Urban Properties, Swenson, and EAH Housing, for negotiation of the proposed terms and conditions of a joint development agreement for a joint development project at the Blossom Hill Station. Ron Golem, Deputy Director, Real Estate, will provide a brief report.
Madam Chair, I'm just going to recuse myself on this under Government Code Section 84308. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
I'm also going to recuse myself.
Oh.
I'm unclear, although I've attempted to determine whether I'd be in compliance to stay in on the vote under the Levine Act. In an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cortese. Okay,
Great.
Brian.
Thank you. Joining me to my left is Kelly Snyder, who's the VTA project management consultant. Kelly has been working with myself and our team throughout this project, and will also be here to provide additional detail as needed. So I'm here tonight to report on the results of the work that staff has done to date on this potential joint development project, the RFP we conducted, and our recommendation. So just to recap the location, the Blossom Hill site is on the south side of 85, just a little bit east of 87. As you can see, it's in a key location in the south part of the city, both near the Oak Ridge retail mall, as well as Marshall Cottle Park.
Just a second, Mr. Golden. I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Cresco.
My apologies. I'm going to have to recuse myself.
Okay.
I apologize.
Thank you. Oh, just a moment.
Okay. So as I was saying, this property, our Blossom Hill Light Rail Station and its park and ride lot, is located within the city of San Jose's Blossom Hill Cahalan Urban Village area. Yes. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Third time's the charm. I point out that this is located within one of the city's urban village plan areas. It's significant for this project because for those VTA joint development sites that are in the San Jose urban village area, they are in the Horizon 2 and 3. And if you're familiar with the urban village plans, those do not allow near-term development. Our concept for this project has been to take advantage of the city's signature project process. And what that does is that when a project that's not in the current horizon and not allowed for near-term development proposes a greater proportional share of job creation and commercial uses, it can be advanced to being in the current project. And so that was the beginning point for our discussion as to why we did the RFP and how we're going to approach this. Having done that, prior to the RFP, we went through a process of working with the community, having a community meeting prior to formulating the RFP document. We have a community meeting that you can see the picture there. And just to touch on some of the key themes that came out of that initial community meeting were issues around how we're going to address traffic, the desire to create a new trail to Marshall Cottle Park, and how we're going to address housing affordability. As I mentioned, we worked with city staff on the urban village plan and specifically what are the signature project requirements. They identified a job creation goal that we think is doable and what the process would be for doing that. In July, we issued an RFP. We conducted another community meeting during the RFP process, and in November, we received responses to our RFP. Just to touch on what the RFP asked for, what we sought for the station and for a joint development project is a quality proposal from an experienced team that has the ability to design, finance, and operate a project. We're looking to maximize long-term revenues to VTA. We'll look to see at least a minimum of 20% of the residential units as affordable housing, and we are seeking more than 20%. We're also seeking to create community workforce and apprenticeship opportunities. And finally, we're looking for the developer to take the lead in working with the community to obtain entitlements and generate support for the project. Let me just share that when we released the RFP, we conducted a broad-ranging marketing and outreach effort. Our joint development mailing list has 4,000 names on it. That consists of both developers of all sizes and types, both locally, regionally, and nationally. It includes architects, engineers, it includes interested parties, and so it goes out. We also had good coverage in the San Jose Mercury News, the Silicon Valley Business Journal, and other media. We had over 100 firms that actually downloaded the RFP and reviewed it. We had 35 firms at our pre-proposal conference, and we had a process of responding to questions and answers throughout the offering. So on the November 2nd, 2018 deadline, we received one proposal. And that proposal is from an entity called Green Republic Blossom Hill, LLC, consisting of 3 members. Republic Urban Properties and Swenson Development would build the market rate portion of the project with ground floor retail. And that would include market rate housing and the retail. And the affordable housing portion of the project would be built by EAH Housing, who's a nonprofit affordable housing developer, who would be responsible for the affordable housing components as well as ground floor retail. And then jointly, they would address the parking. Now, before I talk about the development program, let me talk about what was one of our first considerations, which is that generally when we receive an RFP, we like to get multiple proposals because to us, that's the best way to ensure that we have a range of options and we're spurring competition. So the fact that we had gotten one proposal was obviously not our goal. Combined with some other recent experiences we had with other RFPs, it prompted us to use our development consultants to actually go back and contact all of the parties that download the RFP and that we had communicated with during the process to understand why we didn't receive more proposals. And that led to other research. And so what we took away from that discussion were several things. One is that there has been a shift in the market. It is getting more difficult to do the types of market rate rental multifamily projects that is the core of our joint development program. It's also the case that with some of the recent trends in economic indicators and the downward trends and concerns about recession, developers have been pulling back on doing new projects. And so we generally realize that we're now facing more challenges in attracting interest to our sites. That is a topic that we will come back to the board next month and talk about in terms of our joint development work plan and how we're now in somewhat of a changing environment and how we respond to that. For this particular case, what we were trying to understand is if we reissued the RFP, or if we reissued even a request for qualifications document, it's a simpler document, could we generate additional responses? And we queried all of the parties that we'd been engaged with and were aware of, because if we had felt, if we've been able to get confirmation from other parties that they would respond to a new offering, we would have gone out and done the offering over again. However, after doing extensive outreach with all the interested parties, we realized, and our feeling is that if we did reissue an RFQ or RFP, we would not receive additional responses. And so based on that, we decided to go ahead and finish the evaluation of the proposal we received and present that to the board, which I'll walk through right now. So in terms of the proposed project, they are proposing 300 residential units. Of the 300 residential units, 23% would be affordable. So there would be 68 affordable units that would consist of a mixture of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units with up to 50% affordable, 50% of area median income. So in other words, all the units would be affordable households at 50% AMI or less. That portion of the project would also have 2,500 square feet of retail. For the market rate portion of the project, there would be 232 market rate units that would be studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units, and 10,000 square feet of retail. Between the two components, there would be 382 new parking spaces they would provide. There would be also other public improvements consisting of an enhanced trail to Marshall Cottle Park, public plazas on site, picnic and play areas. And I'll show this in a minute. This is basically a site plan that shows what we're talking about. And so essentially, there would be sort of two areas. The right area is a larger portion that's market rate. The left portion is the affordable housing component. And you see the plaza to the left of that. Above that, you see the VTA transit parking that would remain. We would have 254 spaces. That is more spaces than we currently have demand for transit riders at the Blossom Hill Station. So in this configuration, we can both do the joint development project and meet the current transit rider demand. I will say that in terms of how the project will work, one of the interesting concepts is that they're actually looking to have a sort of an arch, if you will, connecting the two parts of the project that would be over the entrance as a way of creating a more cohesive street edge and visibility for the project. So let me talk for a minute about what the proposed financial terms are. The proposal we received is for a 65-year ground lease, that there would be lease payments during the first 2 years of construction of $110,000 a year that would be dedicated to station improvements for the benefit of both transit riders as well as residents and workers in the project. In the third year, there'd be no ground rent. In the fourth year, they would start paying $200,000 per year in base rent, with an adjustment of 1.5% per year for each year thereafter. And then every 20 years, that ground rent would be adjusted by the change in the adjusted gross income. So I think the easiest way to explain that is that each year the ground rent would go up 1.5%. Every 20 years, we would look at how gross rents had changed over that time period, and if that change was greater than the increases we've gotten to date, there'd be an additional bump up to help us keep the ground rent tracking what market values are. So based on that, when we looked at what the total revenue would be over a 65-year ground lease, that would be $50.9 million on a gross dollar basis. That assumes an annual 3% growth in adjusted gross income. And if you look at that on a net present value, in other words, today's dollars based on a 5% discount factor, that would be approximately $7.4 million. So, based on the evaluation of the proposal, staff's recommendation is to the board of directors is to enter into an exclusive negotiations agreement with Green Republic Blossom Hill for this project. Now, our feeling for proceeding with this is based on several things. One is that we think there is a potential to improve this deal. I think that if you look at the economics, we feel that there is definitely room to improve them. In some ways, they are affected by some of the market feasibility challenges, but we think we can negotiate a better outcome. We also think there's ways that we can increase the project, and so if we can increase the revenue that we get and if we can get a better project out of it, we can accomplish our goals of generating revenue, increasing transit ridership, and hopefully catalyzing additional transit-oriented development and enhancing the experience for our transit riders both today and in the future. The specific recommendations from the evaluation panel for the guidance for the negotiations would be to increase the density of the project up to a minimum of 90 units an acre, to increase the frequency of rent adjustments to better track changes in market values, to increase the visibility and the usability of the open space, the public open space in the project for all parties, to enhance the access that would be provided from the site to Marshall Cottle Park, and then to ensure that we do have adequate parking for all uses. So I will just sum up by saying that, as Director Carr said, at A&F there was discussion in the staff report. There were recommendations in that discussion that really what we should be thinking about is ensuring that the architectural design in the street edge is welcoming for all parties, and so that the project does not overwhelm the sense of arrival at the transit station, so it's clear you're arriving at BTA's Blossom Hill Station. And that we also look at really enhancing transit-forward design, station access, and public spaces, which are all comments that staff agrees with. And with that, we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ron, for that report. Now, are there questions at this time from the board members to staff? Oh, Mr. McAllister, did you?
Yeah, sorry, but I might have walked out of the room when you answered the question, but could you go to the slide number 9 maybe? I think it was our page. Yeah, right there.
This one? Okay.
The archway over the main entrance. Why, if we're going to have a large development, that we're going to have cars dividing the property? And I'm concerned about pedestrians coming in and out and so forth like that. So when I saw that, it was rather dangerous in the sense that you were dividing the two areas. So why is this just a conceptual idea at this moment, or is there still work to be done?
This is a conceptual idea that certainly is subject to revision. Our process as we work with the developer, if the board approves the ENA, is that we'll be working with our colleagues in operations to really think through all the fine-grained details about how the circulation works into the station for pedestrians, people who park, who drive to the station, all those who come there. And so certainly if that idea becomes unworkable, then we would change that. We felt that it was an interesting concept from the developer in that architecturally it can create some interest, and if it's done properly, you could strike a balance between both kind of creating an interesting edge along that street, but still having a clear identity for the station so you know you're arriving at a VTA light rail station, and you also have clear understanding of how to safely move in and out of it, whether you're a pedestrian or driver, bike rider, or anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
And I should also note that that intersection is signalized.
Okay, if there aren't, I have a question. So on that same site plan slide, I was noticing there that it looks like in the middle of the market rate building that there are some amenities, and I don't know if the blue is to represent a swimming pool. Are all those amenities available to the members, the residents at the affordable building?
Yes.
Okay, great. So are there I don't have any comment cards. Is there a member of the public that wish to ask a question or make a comment on this item? Okay.
Move approval.
Oh, okay.
So I will second that, but I actually have some, I have some benchmarks that I want to have included in it. So, first thing is that I see that we're looking at a 1-year negotiation period. I'd like to ask that there be a midpoint check-in with the board in closed session in the 6 months, and at that time, if there appears to be a lag in terms of being able to get the negotiations completed, that the board be apprised of that, because we, at some point, we're going to not want to keep talking to them. We're going to want to see stuff built. So that's the first request. The second is that I would like to see clear performance benchmarks included in the negotiation, with the ability of the VTA board to withdraw from the agreement if those timelines aren't met, and recognizing that we can't predict the future of the market, but I also don't want us to be in a position where we're
we're renegotiating as the market goes down. I'd rather preserve the property than do that. And then the third is that I would like a stronger assessment of the affordable housing, the number of units that are included in the project, particularly based on the current starting point of negotiations that are reflected on page 5. And then finally, I really want to appreciate the first point that you made at the beginning of the staff report, recognizing that this is both part of the ability for the organization to have long-term revenue. And I just want to emphasize that I recognize the competing interest between more affordable units and that number, but I also feel like there's still a lot of room in this framework. So those would be my 4 recommendations to the maker of the motion.
Those are accepted.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Miller?
Yeah, John mentioned it, and you answered, this is just conceptual. There's 2 decades of research that says you don't separate affordable from market rate. You want it integrated for the best results. And so I'm actually exceptionally concerned the way the plan got driven, not for the people issues, because it looks like there's a bridge. I would have much preferred to have seen a plan, and I'm hopeful that we can give some direction. I think that we should try much harder to integrate the affordable units in with the market rate. I get that there's 2 separate builders. I get some of the complexities, but I just feel like we're creating a haves and a have-nots, and I know the outcomes are not as good when you do that. And again, we've seen it. There's 20 years of research that says integrate when you can. So I don't know how that works, if we just give direction or if it has to be part of the motion.
If I may, I mean, you bring up an excellent point, and certainly there's a lot of research. I think that, we've been making a policy choice, and in some ways the choice we've been making tracks how affordable housing is being developed in general nowadays in many locations. And that is that when we first started out with joint development and looking at feasibility, we used our consultants to help us understand what are the economics of mixed income housing when you develop it in one building versus, say, in 2 separate leaseholds like this. And what we found from that, and again, this tracks the experience not just of ourselves, but other both affordable housing developers and market rate developers, is that because of the complications of assuming a capital stack in a mixed income project, you can't build as many units when you do in a mixed income project. And so the advantage to the separate leaseholds, and this is why we've been pursuing this, is that we get more affordable housing units. And so we have felt that given the choice between kind of greater integration as you're suggesting, but still building a high quality project where when you look at it, you can't tell which part is market rate and not, where you can still have mixing between the 2 groups in terms of use of amenities and so on, that it would be more important to maximize the number of affordable housing units we build. And so we've been consciously proceeding down that direction. Now, that is a policy choice, but that is how we've been approaching it to this point.
Yeah, when you put the road down the middle, it really separated it. There are ways to do exactly what you want without the giant architectural division. But again, you get the sense, and you'll do your best efforts in those things.
Mr. Prowlis.
I think Ron answered it well. We've experienced the same issues on multiple sites, and I know we've experienced it on the Tamian side as well. But I think we're trying to find creative ways to get as much affordable housing as possible, and the financing is really one of the major hurdles to do so. But I agree with your sentiment, Director Miller, on regards to, and we had these conversations in the Tamian project as well on sort of how these 2 blend and fit together as best as possible. So I agree with your sentiment.
Member Carr?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the recommendations from A&F are included in the motion moving forward tonight. They were on a separate slide talking about transit-forward design and that the transit station is more visible, welcoming outside the project boundaries. I just want to make sure that that's captured in the motion that's going forward tonight. Yeah, and it's in the staff report, too.
Okay, yeah. I'll make it clear those are included.
Okay, good. Okay, Mr. McAllister.
Yeah, so going back to my question about dividing the property up, if we're going to throw our 2 cents in, I think I'd rather, and even the information that you said there was a signal there, I'd still rather see that made park, open space, and then put the entryway on the side, because then I think you would have pedestrian safer, bike safer, and more open space that was be usable by both groups. So that's just a.
And I think to echo that, that was our feeling too. We had concerns about the public spaces shown in the proposal in the concept drawing that's on the screen. Whether that creates public space that's kind of separated and hidden, which is a very bad thing for public space. And so I think what you're suggesting is there's ways to maybe look at the public space in ways that kind of make it more accessible and visible, and that kind of helps the circulation. And we will certainly look at that as we go forward.
I'd like to see the public space between the two buildings versus on the site. Thank you.
Okay, Member Dieppe.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo the sentiments of Director Miller, but also kind of drill down. I think as policymakers, we all want the integrated, affordable, and market rate housing, but just for the members of the public following along and not really understanding what we talk about when we say the financing of it, you know, when we do affordable housing, we look for grants from the federal and state levels and wherever we could find it, and often those grants are contingent upon density. The more affordable units we have on a project, on a building, we can get more money out of it. And so when we actually shuffle the deck, as it were, when we shuffle the affordable units and the market rate, we get actually less affordable density in a building. And perversely, that makes us less eligible for the affordable housing money. And so to the extent that we, you know, as elected officials climb up and become state legislators or federal legislators, I mean, this is something that we have to tackle, because it's very true that we want to integrate these units, but the money available for it actually prevents us from doing so. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you.
You probably can't see because of my. Yes. Sorry about that. I know it's kind of hidden behind the screen here. I just had a couple of comments and such, and I really want to make sure that in the ultimate layout, because this is obviously just an initial proposal, is that there is a lot of attention to the circulation, particularly the pedestrian circulation, because in dividing the project, if you're bifurcating this with the access path to parking, you know, I think people behave a certain way when they're trying to drop their kids off at school and when they're trying to catch a train, and that is you kind of speed so you don't miss the train, right? So just watching that pedestrian circulation, and again, with the amenities being on both sides, how much of the amenities are families and individuals where they're more traffic across that entryway than we're anticipating. And the other thing is, when we do a project like this, do we consider whether or not adding photovoltaic, not only in terms of the housing projects and such, but also looking at in terms of our own lots, as whether or not that kind of comes into play, and particularly when you've got this parking lot. I guess I'd like to see how we can do something with this parking lot. You got a residential thing, and then you got this sea of asphalt. Again, the images right now don't show much in terms of tree canopies, or if you're not going to do tree canopies, do we want to do photovoltaic canopies or something? But that's a pretty ugly parking lot in a residential thing, and I know it's for us, but can we do something there?
Well, I would certainly agree with you that I don't think there's such a thing as a pretty parking lot. You know, I think there's two parts to what you're getting at. So one part, with respect to VTA's facilities, you know, our ability to consider solar, you know, installing additional solar panels over the parking lot or our station facility, this project does not impede that at all. I would defer to my colleagues in the VTA Sustainability Program who lead that effort, but as you know, we have a history of developing solar facilities at a number of our locations. With respect to the project, of course, the projects are required to meet the California Green Building Codes. From our perspective, we are looking to push the developers to get closer to having greening of the project. So at this point, I couldn't say definitively whether solar is more advantageous than other measures, but as part of this process, we are trying to get the project to be more sustainable. For those of you who follow this, you know, we're kind of at the leading edge, and there are very few projects that are quite there, but we all know that in the near future, by near future I mean say in the next 10 years, new development is going to be net zero carbon in terms of its impact. And so from our perspective, at this point in time, we are trying to kind of push that as far as long as we can.
Okay, great. So we, alternate member Hendricks would like to speak on this item.
On Measure A Oversight Committee. And we keep hearing about funding of what's going on with this. And through the chair, I'm kind of interested, did we as VTA try and look at any of the county $950 million bond? And if we did, could we find anything out about maybe what the challenges was, a little bit to what Director Dieppe was talking about, and maybe this would be a good learning experiment, maybe back as feedback to the county supervisors in terms of the rules and constraints and parameters?
Rules he's talking about are state and federal. We have a
But
lot of
I was just using that as, it also could apply to us as a county. And is there anything about the way, the parameters the county has for how to use their money that either makes it difficult or easy for us to be able to use this in this or other future projects? I'm just trying to understand, did we try and use Measure A money on this? If yes, it sounds like we didn't get a good answer. Do we need to, is there anything we could look at that says it would make this project easier to use?
So if I could just make an observation about Measure A and then make a point that based on the fact that these are ongoing negotiations, I'm going to be very general in what I'm about to say, which is that our goal has been to leverage state and federal dollars, because often what gives us a leg up in being able to apply for those state and federal dollars is actually the local money that we're investing. And so the issues that are being raised that Lon brought up that I think are really very important and thoughtful are not, our rules are different. Like, we don't have as many rules, frankly, as they do at the...
I was just using that in generally speaking, not specifically about that. I'm just saying, the question is, could Measure A money be used for this, yes or no?
The answer is yes, but let me just say the but. Three things. One is the city of San Jose would probably invest, we would probably invest, but these units are approximately probably $500,000 a unit, and so it's still a lot of money, and so we're going to still want to draw down state and federal dollars, because what we want to be able to do is use the $950 million we have now to leverage those other resources so that we can really spread our money out. So the local money, we hope, makes us more competitive for state and federal dollars.
I'll check with you offline.
And if I may just add for the benefit, for our other joint development projects, specifically at Tamia and Evelyn, we and our developer partners are working with the county's Office of Supportive Housing that oversees Measure A implementation, and we are pursuing Measure A funding for those projects, and I would expect that that will be the case for this project as well.
So I want to say one thing that I've said, I'll just tell you what I've said to Ron, that I will just say to you all, is that I would really like to see the public entities negotiating in tandem and not in opposition of each other. And that's really critical, because these are all public assets, these are all public dollars, and our objective is spend them as wisely as we can to get as many units as we can.
Okay, so seeing no other comments, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us to other items. First item is 8.1, our general manager report. Nuria.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening. So it's that time of year when we release our annual report from the previous year, looking back on how we did in 2018. It summarizes the challenges, opportunities, and accomplishments as we continue to change the way we deliver mobility solutions in Santa Clara County. As a congestion management agency, we have set a very high bar for being sustainable in how we work, how we purchase, and how we deliver our services. So with that in mind, the 2018 annual report will only be available online. Early next week, we will upload a link to our VTA.org site for you to access. This is the front cover. You all heard me give a full review in December of the year. And what we're going to be doing here is just summarizing some of the challenges, but also celebrating a lot of the great accomplishments that the agency experienced. In other news, for the third time in 5 years, the VTA has won first place in the American Public Transportation Association's Marketing Ad Wheel Award. Our Destinations campaign was a low-cost social media campaign using artful illustrations and engaging VTA riders to nominate favorite eateries they go to using VTA. Our riders whose nominations received the highest number of votes were given a gift certificate to the winning eateries. This win puts the destination campaign in the running for the APTA AdWheel Grand Award winner, which will be announced at the annual conference in the fall. So if we succeed, it will add a 4th gold star to the other stars in our display case. So I want to thank our marketing team. They did an extraordinary job, as they always do, and this is one of those creative ways of reaching into our customers and having them participate in the effort of encouraging others to use public transit. As a next item, I just wanted to provide a brief update on our outreach efforts seeking public input to the draft 2019 New Transit Service Plan. You heard from the public today, and as we heard, last Thursday, February 28th, was the conclusion of the public engagement effort for this project. So our goal is really to gain the input and insight on proposed changes to existing service per VTA Board's direction. So as you may know, VTA hosted 6 community meetings over a 6-week period, and staff delivered presentations at 20 additional meetings that were hosted by other organizations throughout the county. We also held a virtual online meeting for those who could not attend a meeting in person. Our website has a summary of what we have heard from the public. The link is on the screen. I know that there are thousands of comments. So this month of March, our planning group will be reviewing the hundreds of public comments received and also use the constructive feedback to help develop the final transit service plan. We're going to be presenting that plan at the VTA advisories and standing committees in April, and our goal is to bring it to the board in May for consideration. The intent is to implement the final transit service plan by the end of this calendar year. Moving on, just wanted to remind the board members of 2 upcoming groundbreaking events this month. The first one is for Phase 3 of the Silicon Valley Express Lanes project. It will take place tomorrow morning in San Mateo County. Phase 3 brings express lanes to US 101 corridor by converting the existing double carpool lanes that are near State Route 237 in Sunnyvale all the way north to San Mateo County line. The carpool connector ramp at the SR 85 will also be converted to express lanes, providing seamless connections to San Mateo's express lanes project, which is currently underway. Tomorrow's event will celebrate this 2-project, 1-corridor facility with Senator Jim Bell and others who played a key role in securing the funding. So the event's details are shown on the screen. The second groundbreaking event is for the Matilda Avenue improvements at SR 237 and US 101, and that'll take place on Friday, March 22nd at 10:30 a.m. at the Sheraton Hotel parking lot. Please join us and our partners at Caltrans and the City of Sunnyvale to celebrate this long-awaited milestone. This project will reduce congestion along Matilda Avenue and improve mobility for all travel modes. Next, as the spring season rolls in, so do a number of VTA campaigns promoting sustainable mobility. VTA is participating in the American Public Transportation Association's National Get On Board Day, and that's going to be celebrated on Thursday, April 25th. We will be joining transit agencies across the U.S. in a campaign to increase support and utilization of public transit as a commuting option. To demonstrate the positive impact that public transit has on our own communities, our marketing group will reach out to local employers, public agencies, nonprofits, educational institutions, and residential communities to have them pledge support to public transit by encouraging and/or incentivizing their employees, constituents, or students to take transit or an alternative to solo driving on National Get On Board Day. We are going to design a decal with the names of all participating entities that will be displayed on a special wrapped bus and train. And yes, VTA will be offering free rides on all bus and light rail on April 25th. Our goal is really to show how getting people out of their cars and onto transit or carpooling that day can improve the quality of the commute experience. Another fun campaign is one that is particularly aimed at solo drivers with commutes that may begin or end outside of VTA service area by promoting carpooling. We will be launching a carpool promotion with Waze and Scoop that offers new carpoolers 5 free rides through June 2019. And the companies and or agencies with the highest percentage of employee participation will receive a food truck party made possible through a grant from MTC. To get this campaign going, VTA will share a first official carpool karaoke video on social media, courtesy of VTA carpooling employees, next week, and then we will invite members of the carpooling public to share their videos and be entered into the carpool karaoke social media contest. So get on board. Next in my report is the ridership information, and I'm going to ask Inez Evans, Chief Operating Officer. She will provide us with the report for the month of February.
Technical difficulty here. Thank you, Neria, and members of the board. Ridership report is as follows. How does this thing work? Excellent. So on the first slide we have is the ridership in comparison for February of 2019. As you can see, we had a decrease in ridership on the bus side by 10.4%. On light rail, 6.3% decrease, and for a system overall decrease of 9.5%. The penetration on Clipper card was 43.3%, slightly up when you compare it to January. We've been seeing, you know, on prior slides that we had shown you, ridership had been going up in October, December, and January. But when we looked at February of 2018 versus 2019, these little things called raindrops, and so the precipitation change this year was 5.61% when you compare it to last year at 0.17. So if we think rain does not have an impact on ridership, that's a 3,200% increase in precipitation. So I carpool every day, and I can tell you, driving the line, there were no people standing out on the light rail platforms, standing in the rain. On the next slide, we just wanted to kind of give you a little bit more comparison. So as you can see, as I said earlier, we saw ridership beginning to increase in October of 2018, particularly on the light rail side. In November 2018, we recorded a decline due to the school closures. If you all recall, there was some significant air quality issues that we had, and we saw a reduction. System ridership continued, though, to increase in December and again in January. And all of these indicate that a certain leveling off of the ridership and increased ridership contribution by certain routes with increased service, which is the next slide. So we just wanted to again demonstrate 4 routes that the planning department did make changes on each one of those slides. It indicates which change took place on them. On the Route 72, midday service frequency was improved from 20 minutes to 15 minutes. On the 73, again, 20 minutes to 15 minutes. 522 went from 30 minutes to 20-minute frequency. And the Route 902 on the light rail system went to every 15 minutes. So as you can see, the ridership has significantly improved. I additionally had my team analyze the light rail because I wanted to give you a little bit more information on what we're seeing on changes in activity at some of our stations. Which I felt was significant is that the Crossman station saw a 72.6% increase in boardings when you look between January of last year to this year. Japantown, a 20.8% increase. Carina Station, 16.9% increase. Moffett Park, 14%. Gish, 14%. St. James, 13.6%. Our own River Oaks, 13%. Orchard, 12.9%. Old Ironsides, 12.7%. And then Metro Airport, 11.6%. So this is all contributing For many of you who are familiar with First Street, there's a revitalization of a lot of the old business parks. So we see new businesses is the point of where I'm going, that there's been some investment, and we are seeing that investment showing up on ridership on our light rail system. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Inez. Next, we're going to have Angelique Gaeta give us an update on the safety data.
Thank you, Naria. So we'll start with, I've got one slide. We'll start with audits. So some good news there. As you know, the CPUC does a triennial audit of VTA. The most recent was done in 2017. They have not finalized their report with the findings to take it to the commission. That should be done in April, so we're still waiting for that to occur. Nevertheless, in the meantime, we have managed to successfully close out 7 of the recommendations that they provided to VTA in terms of corrective actions. So notwithstanding the absence of a final report, we've been taking action on our own to get those items closed out. We also have 4 pending review by the CPUC, and then we continue to work on the remainder. Additionally, we are required to do audits of 21 elements of our system over a 3-year period. This year, or excuse me, in 2018, we conducted 4 audits, or audit areas, and we're happy to announce those were submitted in February. The results of those audits were submitted in February to the CPUC with full reports, and they were approved and accepted by the CPUC, so they are now closed out. And then separately, for program updates, every year VTA is required to look at our System Safety Program Plan. The acronym SSPP is up there on the slide. And we're required to look at it, review it, and see whether or not it requires any updating to reflect any changes in the organizational structure or any of the policies and procedures that we have amended. And so we did that annual review, and we did some updates to reflect some changes. That report or update was submitted at the same time as our internal audits to the CPUC just last month. They responded with a request for some minor tweaks. We have since done those tweaks, and they were vetted through our Rail System Safety Review Board and approved, and they'll be submitted to the CPUC for a final closeout next week. In addition, we also looked at our accident investigation procedures, which is also known as VTA Standard Operating Procedure 530. And we felt that some updates were necessary as well. The CPUC agreed with us. We submitted those updates in February, and we're happy to report that those were reviewed and approved and received by the CPUC as well. So good news all around with regard to updates and audits. Separately, on an annual basis, we run a campaign, a safety campaign, that really focuses on keeping the public safe on and around our system. This year, in addition to that campaign, we're actually taking a look inward, and that means we're looking at ways to continue to keep our employees safe. Some of the things that we'll be looking at, and we are in the process of looking at, are our safety vest policy, our hazard management program, and how to handle bloodborne pathogens. So our safety vest policy actually was just fully vetted, went through a number of committees, including joint committees with our employees. Some of those include our joint ATU VTA Safety Committee and our joint SCIU VTA Safety Committee. So the safety vest policy has gone through that process, was approved, and we will be rolling that out to our employees in the near future. We'll also be bringing that to our SSTP&O committee and sharing what that looks like with folks, so that it's the word is shared not just directly with our employees, but also with our board members, so folks understand things we're doing to keep our employees safe. Our hazard management program was also just passed and reviewed by the CPUC as well, so we're rolling that out currently. And then we are currently working on our bloodborne pathogens. But again, all of those will be brought forward to the SSTP&O committee, so you'll hear more of a full report at that time. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Angelique. Are there any questions? The next item in my report, Madam Chair, is item 8.1A. The information on government affairs is in the reading folder. I understand that there's a public comment card on this item.
Yes, Andrew Boone wish to comment on this item. Please come forward.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Boone, and I wanted to encourage you that one piece of legislation that I would hope could appear in future updates of the government affairs report is that which applies to traffic signals, the cameras used at traffic signals. So under state law currently in California, cities cannot use speeding cameras on highways or on city streets, but can use red light running cameras, which are not commonly used, and I actually don't know if there are any cities in this county that use them. Menlo Park does. It has 5 of them. Regarding speeding cameras, those should be legalized in California. The legislature has to do it. I believe City of San Jose has supported that, and I thank you for doing so, members of the San Jose City Council. It didn't get out of committee last year, but it just needs to try again. Speeding cameras have reduced speeding very effectively in Arizona, where I'm from. There were new highways that they were applied to, and quickly people adapted to just driving slower in that highway where the cameras are placed. And similar success we've had in jurisdictions that have red light cameras, but the state law requires what a lot of people say is an excessively high fine, and I actually agree. It's over $500 that you have to charge per red light violation due to state law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, the next item is an update on the Silicon Valley Rapid Transit. I would like to invite the presenters and also to introduce the board to Jorge Martinez. He is the program manager for our SVBX program with Bechtel, and he will be presenting from this time forward. He will be delivering the update on the BART Phase 1 project. Dennis Radcliffe, Deputy Director for the SVRT Capital Program, will accompany Jorge.
Thank you, Neri. I'd just like to spend a moment to introduce Jorge. Jorge Martinez is a vice president in the Bechtel Infrastructure Business Unit. BTA engaged Mr. Martinez last summer to manage the last stages of construction, testing, and startup of the Berryessa Extension project. He has extensive experience managing major infrastructure projects, not only domestically but also internationally. Among them, the WMATA Silver Line extension to Dulles Airport, New York and New Jersey Metro station reconstruction at World Trade Center after 9/11, heavy rail construction and startup at Port of Los Angeles and the South New Jersey Light Rail Transit. Jorge now serves as VTA's project manager for the Berryessa Extension and manages all day-to-day project activities. And I'm pleased to have him here to give you tonight's update. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Pardon me, I'm starting to get my annual allergy, so my throat is a little bit on edge. As has been reported to the board, the project is still on schedule to complete by the end of this year, late fourth quarter. We noted last month that there was a tour of the project site and things look completed. All of the civil works are essentially, as you've noted, complete, and they look ready for operation. We are still working on an extensive list of minor punch list items, none of which will really impact revenue operations date, but that need to be done. The remaining work is centered on completion of the life-critical communications and control systems, and that always seems to be the most frustrating part for the public to understand, but it's all of the stuff that is essential for running the system safely and for integrating with the existing BART system, but unfortunately it's not visible to the public. So
we are focused on the next major milestone, which is the project and the contractor completion of the testing of those systems, both from functionality and system integration perspective, and getting ready to hand that off to BART for their pre-revenue testing and pre-revenue operations. We have hit a couple of successes recently. As has been reported, the components that were installed by the contractor that were non-compliant to the project specifications, that program which has been a delay to the job, and that has been completely now replaced, and all of those systems tested. It would be noteworthy to mention that Cisco, who is the proprietary manufacturer of those systems, really kicked in at the last minute and helped us both from a software and hardware installation. So we appreciate their effort in supporting that remedial work. Another success that we recently had was the early engagement of BART in taking over the routine maintenance of the track, the ballast track and third rail. This is preliminary to them actually assuming responsibility for the system, and we have had collaborative discussions to continue turning over components of it. The next would be the drainage systems, for instance, of the track work, and ultimately just the entire guideway right-of-way for general maintenance. So we are getting BART engaged early. We're also getting BART engaged in some of their early testing that is overlapping our contractor testing, so they're getting a little bit of a head start on some of their pre-revenue testing. And we can report that there's been good collaborative, at the troop level, at the ground level, with the BART resources. As Dennis reported last month, we have had a couple of challenges to our schedule. The first challenge that he had mentioned last month was the RID system, which is the fence alarm system that's mandated by the CPUC, and this is a rail intrusion. Should anything come over the fence from the Union Pacific Railroad, either in cargo or a car, as for instance, this system would detect it. And the contractor had experienced some difficulty in the reliability of the system that had been placed. So we were concerned last month that the remedial work might be an impact to the project. Happy to report that since that report, we have gone through and replaced all the components that were suspect. And in replacing them, we've done some additional quality control work to make sure that there aren't any residual problems, in addition to installing some instrumentation that would detect anything that might be a problem in the future, like an anomalous current. So we no longer think that RIDS is a threat, and the work is ongoing, but well under control. The additional potential threat that was mentioned last month was the challenges associated with documentation. And this documentation is the interim documentation that we need to be able to hand off for the BART pre-testing. It isn't necessarily the system certification testing. So when I first arrived on the project, one of the issues that was noted at that time was that the contractor was significantly behind in the development of the documentation that we needed to be able to hand over to BART. So a significant level of effort has been made in the last few months. Of the 17 major systems that we need to have documented to turn over to BART, we actually completed the BART page turn, which is a walkthrough of our completed documentation package, pre-handoff to BART so they can do their initial reviews. So 2 of those systems have been done since the last report. We have 2 more ready to go next week, and the remaining packages are now scheduled to be completed without impacting to the project. So we were able to get control of the magnitude. We're working again collaboratively with BART. They are now on board with the process for being able to pre-read those packages during these page turns, and that should facilitate the review and comment on our part. The third potential risk to the schedule that was reported has to do with a power surge that occurred during One of the initial tests that BART was running, and this is actually a phase 3 test, it's not part of our contractor testing program, but on December 16th, there was a power surge during this test where we were actually connected to the PG&E substation, resulted in blowing out a large number of fuses, both on our extension as well as on the Warm Springs side of the BART system. So a significant effort by the project team at that point was to get the fuses replaced and to repair the system so we could determine what occurred. As of this date, we have had the contractor, the specialists that are involved with it, primarily Powell Rail Systems, involved. They have been unable to detect the reason for that power surge, and we have undertaken a program of getting the system back up and running, and you know, even if we are hypothetically never able to identify that initial power surge, we need to get the system recertified and back in operation. Because of the potential safety issue, though, we have had to proceed at a very cautious pace. So we're not able to partially re-energize the system until last week. We have another full re-energization that's scheduled for next week, and we will plan to rerun that test that during which the failure occurred in the early weeks of April. So, having said that, it's not unusual to have unknowns like this. BART is unable to explain what could have happened during the running of the test. We have been unable to determine what could have happened on our side of it. As I mentioned, PG&E is involved in this, but we hope by the next report to actually be able to identify a root cause of the surge, and unfortunately, that's the best information I can give you. The potential threat to the schedule, of course, is that we've already suffered a partial delay, and in spite of that delay, we are still looking at completion before the end of the year. All right. An additional component that we've been doing is we've been working with the FTA in doing a risk analysis of the schedule. We just completed the second phase of this workshop February 27th. This was an initial workshop that was held in December of last year, and which is basically where we all come together and try to identify any of the potential risks to the schedule. And it's inclusive of BART, ourselves at the project team, and the FTA's consultant. So we don't have the results of this, but I can report that there were no unusual risks that were identified, and the risks that were identified, we already have mitigations in play for. So we don't expect any surprises to come from the FTA's consultant's report. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Are there any questions from members of the board?
We did Andrew Boone, if you're out in the lobby, this is your chance, but I saw him putting his scarf on, so he probably left.
Madam Chair, one question.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, if I could. I'm just trying to look ahead, and I know these things are hard to estimate, but just given where we're at and the challenge of being able to power this up and run the tests until April, are we looking at another delay?
Not knowing what we don't know, I would say that that at the project level, we're optimistic. I mean, it is not unusual in our discussions with BART. They themselves have said it is not unusual to have something like this happen, and to not really truly be able to find out why it happened. It's just better sometimes to just rebuild the system, recertify, and move on. The key is that we need to be sure that we're working safely and that the system is safe to operate afterwards. Having said that, our current schedule for dealing with this issue does not threaten the December 31st date as a last date.
Good luck. Thanks.
Hearing no further questions, thank you very much. I would now like to invite Ron Golem. The next item on the agenda is to receive a presentation on the creating a transit-oriented community as part of the BART Phase 2 extension project.
Great. Thank you for giving us a chance to come and talk about, providing you a progress report on the FTA-funded study to look at the BART Phase 2 corridor and our TOD strategy and access for that. Joining me is Jill Gibson, who is BTA's BART Phase 2 planning manager, and we'll both be giving this presentation. You know, before I start, I'd like to recognize, I think, a key observation that Mayor Liccardo made recently, and that is that one of the things that's happened in this county historically is that we have not received the maximum return on investment that we should from our transit investments because we have not connected land use and transit. And this study that we're doing right now is really about how we maximize the connection between the BART Phase 2 extension and land use, and we maximize the public's return on investment. So first, I'd like to talk through two concepts that really frame how we're approaching this. I think most here have heard us talk about transit-oriented developments. When we talk about transit-oriented development, what we're referring to are both projects that VTA does on projects that it owns, or properties it owns as joint development, but we're also referring to privately owned development around our transit stations. And these are both important projects. The idea behind TOD is that we're accommodating both employment, housing, a range of recreational choices, and we're designing projects to really maximize how folks can access these uses from transit, that these are transit-oriented, transit-friendly types of projects. But beyond the individual projects, what's even more important is the surrounding station area. And by station area, I mean the area that's within a 10-minute walk or a 10-minute bike ride. Because really, when you look at the geography, the opportunity to maximize the benefit from transit extensions like BART Phase 2 is when we think about the individual projects, but we think about how they all fit together in a transit-oriented community that consists of projects. So it's about the totality of how the individual TOD projects work together within the station area to maximize pedestrian, bike riding, all modes of access, and the transit environment. And obviously, one of the goals that we're trying to do with this is to maximize the transit ridership, and out of the growth in transit ridership comes all the benefits that we seek from the project. So with that, you know, we feel that the BART Phase 2 project really presents a unique opportunity to shape the future of the station areas based on the multi-billion-dollar public investment. At the same time, it's not something that's going to happen in and of itself. It's not going to happen if we just kind of do a series of projects. What is really needed to accomplish all of these benefits is a cohesive transit-oriented development strategy, and it's important because the one remaining piece of the puzzle for us is the federal funding. And we know that when FTA is going to look at our funding application, they're not looking for vision and they're not looking for plans, they're looking for commitment. And so this strategy document that we're working on is part of the beginning of a process, working with our city partners and others to really develop not just a strategy and not just plans, but commitments and measures that FTA can look at and see that there's been a commitment across the board by all agencies to maximizing the benefits that come from the BART Phase 2 extension. I will share with you that based on the market work we've done today, we understand and we believe that currently the 4 BART Phase 2 station areas can accommodate more transit-oriented development than has been recognized and planned for in the current plans by the City of San Jose and the City of Santa Clara. But if we're going to realize that potential, we need to address a range of policy needs and challenges that left unaddressed could inhibit the ability to create successful TOD. And so ultimately, and I can't say this often enough, it's all about how we maximize that land use connection to drive ridership, to drive the return on transit infrastructure, and the range of public benefits that we seek. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jill to talk about the study process in more detail.
Thanks, Ron. So last year, we kicked off an 18-month strategy study. The study is funded through a Federal Transit Administration grant for TOD planning. FTA provides these TOD planning grants to support their mission of improving transit through better integration of transit and land use, which, as Ron mentioned, leads to, of course, increased ridership. The TOD strategy study's focus is to identify and recommend strategies that enable walkable, lively communities with a mix of uses for a mix of incomes centered all around the BART stations. As you can see on the slide, our study includes the Alum Rock 28th Street Station, downtown San Jose Station, the Santa Clara Station, and you'll notice Diridon is being studied through a separate planning effort, although the recommendations that we learned from this study are likely applicable to the Diridon area as well. The study includes two main components. First, the land use strategy includes tools that will achieve the vision for growth around the station and recommend policies that increase investment in TOD. The access planning component ensures that the station areas offer a variety of mobility options for all those accessing the station and the surrounding areas. VTA has hired an interdisciplinary team of consultants to develop these strategies and tools to catalyze TOD and finance all of the improvements necessary to create such a transit-oriented community. Close partnership between VTA, BART, the City of Santa Clara, and the City of San Jose is essential for this study's success. As you know, VTA does not have land use authority and relies on the cities for the implementation of land use, zoning, and other strategies to facilitate TOD. So we're collaborating very closely with both cities to develop these tools, which then they can use and implement as they see appropriate. We've held monthly coordination meetings with city staff and quarterly technical advisory group workshops to gather input. These forums have allowed us to closely partner with staff, and we greatly appreciate their time and attention to the study. We are engaging stakeholders and members of the public through individual briefings and presentations throughout the life of this study. So far, we've engaged stakeholders through nearly 20 briefings, with many more scheduled through the remainder of this study. These stakeholders include business associations, the chambers of commerce, nonprofits, neighborhood groups, and advocacy groups, as well as small businesses along the BART corridor. The TOD study has held several interactive workshops with the community working groups and the public to gain input on their vision for the priorities and means of addressing key challenges in their station areas. We've been able to engage over 200 community members throughout our workshops. Our next set of workshops are going to be held in April, and we'd welcome everyone interested to come participate. We'll be previewing the draft strategies and gathering input for the study's recommendations. Following the workshops, we'll continue to work with the stakeholders as we refine the study's recommendations. The study is structured in 3 phases: background conditions, opportunities and constraints, and the implementation strategies and tools. So first, background conditions. Because the study builds upon all of the great work that has been done to date by the communities and the cities, our first step was to review the existing plans, which sets the foundation for the vision for TOD in each of the station areas. Next, we evaluated opportunities for growth and examined constraints that may limit the potential for TOD. This includes things like identifying sites for higher density and any limiting factors such as height restrictions, market projections, current policies, and local preferences. This phase also includes multimodal transportation gaps that may need to be addressed in order to provide the mobility necessary to support transit-oriented communities. These first 2 phases provide the foundation for developing implementation strategies and are summarized in draft reports that are available on our website. Finally, the heart of this study is what's underway now: implementation strategies and tools. These recommendations will include ways to create a market for TOD and policies to facilitate TOD, as well as policies to address the risk of displacement, both commercial and residential. This study will also recommend an implementation plan that includes phasing and financing of access and infrastructure improvements. We'll compile our recommended strategies into a report that will be made publicly available this June, and we'll discuss with our stakeholders, and the report will be posted on our website.
So I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk about kind of how we see the opportunity and what the final study will look like. What you have in front of you is a 3D model that we've created to really understand the potential for TOD in transit-operated communities. You can see that we've highlighted the Diridon station effort, but as Jill knows, that's a separate planning effort, so we've been focused on the other 3 stations. So what you can see in here is what we've defined as the stationary boundaries based on that 10-minute walk, based on that 10-minute bike ride, as well as the corridors between them. The purple areas represent opportunity parcels, and this was important because we wanted to look at not just the market potential, but can this actually occur? And the good news is there's a lot of capacity for development in the corridor. In fact, right now a lot of attention has been focused on Google, but when you think about the entire corridor through the 2040 timeframe, really the opportunity for BART Phase 2 is multiple Googles in terms of the kinds of employment and housing and other benefits we can create. The other thing I'd like to say is that, of course, there's a lot of attention on Diridon, there's a lot of attention on downtown, and a fair amount of attention on the 28th Street. I want to say that doing this work, we've also come to realize that really there's an underappreciation, in our opinion, of the potential at the Santa Clara station. We think that there's really a great opportunity there, and of course that will require collaboration between the two cities to realize that potential. So what will be the outcome of this study? And I'm sorry, the graphics are a little bit on top of each other here, but what we're trying to do with this study is we're really trying to optimize several things. One is about placemaking. How are we making these stations and the station areas destinations that companies, residents, visitors, people, the community want to be at? We're focusing on mobility. How do we maximize the use of all modes? How do we emphasize pedestrians and bikes and transit and modes of access to really create that multimodal environment? Finally, we're emphasizing economic value, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But the economic value is, of course, important to both attract the development, but also to create the community benefits that need to come out of this project. At the core of this is what we're calling the user experience. And what I mean by that is that this sort of an effort and our work on transit-oriented communities needs to be focused on what is the experience for the transit rider, for the worker, for the resident, for the visitor. How do we make this a place that they want to come to, that they want to take BART or other modes of transit to get to, and how they want to keep coming back? So what we hope to do with the study when we come back after it's released in June and give you a presentation on it is what we'll be doing with the study is really on each of the station areas creating a path to a transit-oriented community playbook in a document that is both comprehensive but very accessible in terms of what are the kinds of strategies and actions that are needed for each of those station areas to realize the potential for the transit-oriented community. Some of the key things that we'll be addressing are what are land use and zoning recommendations that can support balanced 24-hour places and accomplish a mix of uses. We're going to look at development guidelines in terms of how you create TOD projects and how you integrate them into transit-oriented communities and how you get them to fit into the existing urban framework, because it's not just about the transit-oriented development, but it's about how it fits into the existing urban fabric. We're going to come back with recommendations about prioritizing infrastructure and access improvements to serve these transit-oriented communities. And this is really, I want to just talk about this for a moment more, is that to create the kind of transit-oriented community environments that we need, we're going to have to address two sets of capital improvement needs. One is the improvement needs the cities have already identified through a capital improvement program. The other is the improvements to streets, to access to sidewalks, streetscape, all of the things that create the environment we want. That is not cheap. That will take money. And so part of this effort is thinking about identifying the totality of what needs to be done, but also to think about how we phase it and how we go about doing that. We're also going to think about some of the key policy actions that are needed. As Jill mentioned a minute ago, we know that it's going to be essential to not just have policies that support development, but to have strong policies that can help us address the displacement risk in terms of displacement of both residents and small businesses in the station areas, and how we create opportunities for residents to come in there. We create opportunities for affordable housing. We create opportunities for small business. The study outcome will be very much focused on how to increase transit ridership. And the final piece of this will be the financing tools. And I think this is something that's going to be very important for application, because if we're going to accomplish all these things, we're going to need to work, we as VTA working with the cities are going to have to think about how we capture the value from this development and how we turn that around and create mechanisms for putting the value that comes from TOD into the public improvements that are needed. That's something that's going to require innovative approaches that think on a district basis, taking advantage of public finance tools, and that very much take collaboration between VTA and the cities of San Jose and Santa Clara. So finally, our next steps. As Jill mentioned, we are in the process right now of bringing together our work and evaluating various strategies, working with our city partners and other stakeholders. We are looking to engage with both city councils in terms of kind of providing them a progress report, and then once the final report is presenting those results to them. We are continuing our public engagement activities. The information is on the website. And later this summer, I think it'll be at the August board meeting, we'll be coming back and actually presenting the draft study to you for your consideration and also reaching out to the two city councils. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, if we don't have any questions yet from the board members, we have two members of the public that wish to speak on this. Omar Chatty, followed by Roland LeBron.
What Mr. Golem said, it sounds really good. My name is Omar Chatty. I just hope that I wanted to give a few more things. Please measure what you're doing and measure that you're reaching the goals that you're attempting to reach with the transit-oriented development. So, for example, the piece of the light rail that's being cut off, hopefully, after 19 years, to the old home improvement center that was the first TOD development. I remember all the public officials saying, oh, this is great, this is TOD. Well, hardly any people use it. If you go down to Palmilla and Cottle, use the experience we have already to leverage a better solution that you have there. So service level is probably F across from Kaiser, because most of the people are still in their cars. There are some people pedestrians, but they tie up traffic. So if you can mitigate that, that would be good. Also evaluate emergency services that will be necessary with the increased density. So for example, if you look at Village Oaks, which is one of those high-density spur developments down near me, how many new riders do we have on Caltrain? And how many new riders do we have on Bus 68? So let's see the reality of TOD so we plan appropriately. Now, we got cars lining the streets outside of there because people are supposed to get out of their cars, but they don't. They need them. So we have increased vandalism, and you have a lot of other issues, insurance for the people who live there. So please evaluate based on reality what we've already done for TOD in San Jose and leverage it to be beneficial for how we design the walkable communities and everything else. And that's the bottom line. So and also for those who live there, that we don't destroy the quality of life and make things worse. Like in Mountain View, we have gridlock on El Camino during rush hour. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that there's so much density and not everybody's getting into transit. So those are my 4 cents worth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. LeBron?
So I have a comment and I have a question. And the comment is very simple. Whatever you do, stay away from Diridan. And the question I have is, have we started studying the Stevens Creek corridor, including potential station locations, and with a primary focus on P3 opportunities, whereby whoever is doing whatever in the Stevens Creek corridor will actually be directly contributing to the construction of the station. Thank you.
Did you want to? Okay, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime and say I really appreciate VTA launching this work. Obviously, it's a great benefit to the city of San Jose. This is work that's probably long overdue for us. And I'm particularly interested in the scope of the work. And if we could go back to the map, Ron, where you showed all the opportunity buildings, sites where you think you could do quite a bit more density. I'm curious why the line, as we really cuts the university in half, because I can imagine on South 8th and 9th Street and so forth, we've got a lot of apartment buildings that are frankly, they're soft story buildings, they're fire traps, they're earthquake traps. I would love to redevelop them because I don't think they're that safe anyway. And they're already multifamily, and it's just a question of how high we build them. Is there a reason why we sort of drew the line? It looks like it's on 7th Street, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, the way that these boundaries are drawn is, again, it's based on the combination of either a 10-minute walk or a 10-minute bike ride from the station location.
Yeah.
And obviously, the connections that we make to the university are essential in terms of the ridership for faculty and staff to university. But let me also say another point, which is that The purpose of drawing a stationary boundary is not to imply that we don't have transit riders coming from outside the stationary boundary.
Right.
The point is really to focus on where we're trying to prioritize the investments in kind of the public realm and the streetscape. And so, it's hard because on a map you sort of have to draw a line to indicate boundaries, but in some ways I think it's better to think about those lines as really soft boundaries. And I think to your point, there are areas that might be a block or two or three beyond the station area, and we do think that there will be benefits from the BART project for those areas, and there'll be synergies, but this is kind of a way of starting to think about what those opportunities and organize our work.
Okay, thank you. And I guess since I think I can say this since it's a public meeting, I don't have to worry about Brown Act. If it's a publicly noticed meeting, we do have a consideration on Tuesday about the heights of buildings relating to flight corridors and so forth. And I suspect it would do us well to have 9 million more square feet of opportunity to build were we to increase those heights. So hopefully all this work will be done where we're all pushing the same direction. So thank you.
Absolutely, and we're very appreciative of the city's work on that study and the opportunity it presents for the BART extension.
If there are no further questions, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Okay, great, thank you. Very interesting. So that takes us to 8.2, which is my report. So on February 22nd, the Board of Directors held a workshop on the future of transportation in Santa Clara County. At the workshop, VTA staff provided an overview of technologies that are rapidly disrupting and changing the transportation industry. Staff also presented 4 focus areas that will likely be impacted by new technologies and the opportunities these technologies will provide for VTA. These areas are maximizing transportation infrastructure, future of transit vehicles, both light rail and bus, potential new transit service models, and future workforce needs. At the end of the staff presentation, board members engaged in a very frank discussion regarding the future of our organization, and that was led by Jeannie Bruins, and I want to thank Jeannie for the great job she did in facilitating that board discussion. In an informal straw poll, board members were asked whether VTA should maintain the status quo, change incrementally, or radically change course. There was unanimous agreement that we should radically change course. Board members spent the remaining time discussing what radical change might look like and what needs to be done. Discussion ranged on a variety of topics, including, but not limited to, creative new ways to deliver services in the age of ride-hailing companies, corporate shuttles, microtransit, and other disruptive forces that are compelling agencies to adapt. Developing a culture within VTA that emphasizes innovation and strategic risk-taking. Creating a plan for addressing changing technologies in transportation. Refreshing a market segmentation study and making this type of data part of a larger data-rich environment at VTA to help inform decision-making. Considering new uses for existing and future right-of-way. Commercializing VTA's assets. Developing a partnership to synchronize signals, streamlining decision-making, and working with our bargaining units to address potential changes to our workforce. As for next steps, the staff will be developing strategies and objectives informed by the board workshop, and staff will be working with the Capital Program Committee and incorporating the board's input into future plans and budgets. It was a very valuable and productive workshop, and I'm looking forward to seeing the ideas brought forth from being realized. And I have to emphasize that we have to build on that energy. We just can't, I think we all had kind of a time where we felt very charged up and raring to go. And I think the key is how do we figure out how to translate that all into plans and actions so that that change that we're talking about can really happen and we can really much better meet the needs of our community. So are there any questions on that or any comments from board members? Okay. So that will take us to items 8.3. Are there any items of concern and referral to administration?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McAllister.
I have 3 items I'd like to bring to either concerns or attention. One, the CASA discussion that's going on throughout the Bay Area, and I want us to put on our VTA fiduciary jackets to think about that. There's been talk about that they would take transportation money away from transportation and give it to housing as incentive, and I would hope that the board would come up to some kind of a policy decision that we could put forward through our government affairs to say that transportation dollars need to stay within the transportation agency. So that is one of my concerns, and hopefully that may come up at discussion. The other item that I had the great pleasure of reading the F of 2021 proposed capital projects. It was a rather interesting reading, and that I would like, because of the financial situation we are in and where we're trying to go, I would like to recommend that this is, even though we're going to be doing a workshop in April, that this packet be presented to the Board of Directors sooner than later to allow them to look at it, to answer questions, to ask questions, and so that when we come up to it, we can take that energy that our chair said and move forward and move in directions. And so when we do look at projects, we are looking for the future and how it projects. So that was one. And while I was looking through this packet, I came across the light rail program East Ridge to BART regional connection for $129.7 million. And I know Mayor Liccardo mentioned it in the CPC, and I was going to ask for some clarification on that. That would that recommendation that comes from CPC include project alternatives that might include bus, BRT, or any new technology, and that the context of the recommendation going forward would put the project in the context of capital cost, ongoing operations, and maintenance costs that are within our new realm of looking at items. So I don't know if I goes to Mayor Liccardo or to, because you mentioned that you were going to be looking into this particular project.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question. I think I understand the point, but I'm not sure.
The question is,
would you like
when
me
you give us a recommendation, or you're going to have a workshop later on this month, and you're going to do a recommendation to the board afterwards, will that recommendation include project alternatives that might include bus or other new technology?
I understand that the committee is having a hearing. My understanding is the opportunity to make those recommendations won't be at that hearing. Am I mistaken about that, gentlemen?
I just want, for clarity, there is a workshop, it's a budget workshop.
Yeah.
We do not have a workshop on the capital program, but of course the capital program will be part of that workshop. We will be coming back to the capital program committee in March. There's an April meeting. Is that correct? Oh, that's right. It is March, this month. In a few weeks, we'll be coming back to that committee. And so your question is, what should we bring to that committee?
I would like a referral to the committee that when they come to us that there is project alternatives to that particular project. I know in May when I first brought up this item that I asked that we could look at other buses. And so if we're going with this new energy of radical, I mean, I looked at this and it seems like we're doing the same old same. And here's an opportunity to be radical and look to the future and do something reasonable. And so that's why.
Yeah, I think I get the point. John, my concern though is I think all we're doing is we're considering and approving a biennial budget. Am I mistaken about that, Nuria?
What is the agenda? I'm looking at Stephen Flynn, who staffs this committee. The committee will be meeting in a few weeks. And is there an item on the agenda where we would have an opportunity to continue discussion on this item? Could you expand, please? YES doesn't get us there.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Flynn. Yes, will be an item on the March 28th Capital Program Committee agenda that will look at this project and look at various alternatives.
Okay.
It'll be a wide-ranging discussion, and it emanates from, as the chair said, the energy that came out of the workshop.
Right. Okay. I guess that answers your question then, John.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, let me follow up the follow question then.
Okay.
Will then the recommendation give us the full, how would the recommendation come forward to the board then?
It will look at the full package, including long-term operating costs, short-term ones. the cost of construction. It'll be the full package.
Okay. And will there be any considerations about the possibility of, since a lot of our projects are built without operating maintenance and ongoing costs, that the potential of reallocating money from Measure B, the $500 million for operation, might go into this project if needed? Or do you get into that depth at this time?
We don't get into that depth at this juncture.
Okay.
I think we can only consider the capital budget, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't think we
The
can
capital, and you could not consider the operating costs and maintenance costs?
I think that comes back to the full board.
Right, and I guess that's the discussion that the board members on that committee will have with some referrals and recommendations for action. I would also like to expand to state that it's not just this project. We identified a number of projects that are part of the Measure A, the 2000 Measure A. I believe there were a couple others. So when we come back to you later this month, it will be a review of all projects, and in this case, at least the three, review of those projects with where they currently are, what the next milestone is going to be, and what the option should be, if we should continue, if we should modify, if we should pause.
So would that be a recommendation from that committee, or that would come to the board to?
Those options will be presented to the Capital Program Committee, and then whatever the decision by that committee will then come to the board.
So that particular committee could also look at pausing that particular or any project?
Yes.
Or stopping that particular project?
The committee would look at what the most feasible option that the staff will be directed to pursue at that point.
Okay, thank you.
I believe, Carolyn, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think Stephen's correct. There's going to be a discussion about the range of alternatives that could be there. I'm not sure at that meeting we would be making a specific recommendation for what it should be. I think we're going to have the discussion at the CPC. So I guess, John, if you're looking for staff to give a recommendation, I don't think we'll be giving a recommendation specific for that item.
I was looking for the CPC when they make their recommendation.
Yeah, the CPC will make the recommendation. Staff will bring options to the March 28 meeting, and CPC will provide guidance on how we should proceed.
Okay, were there any other items? I mean,
I'm sorry, I don't want to make this more of a mess, but right now, all the projects that we're working on, we identified as projects that have pathways and a process to them. And so as of right now, we're moving forward as if that is a project. And so I think the point that John is raising is actually very important, because at some point, and maybe this is through the Capital Committee, but I'll just say this to the chair, to our CEO, there are a number of projects that I think we all want to look at in each other's backyards. And I'm mostly saying that because I actually think that's very true, that we're going to be looking at what the values are of projects that we want, and that maybe others don't want, still don't want. But so what I'm just going to recommend that at least you consider is what process we can use to make it easiest for the board to be able to have those considerations, because in some ways they're not one-offs. Not doing one thing doesn't necessarily mean we're doing another, and I just think that's going to get complicated as a set of discussions. So I mostly raise that just because I even though I know we have this committee and I'm really excited about it, I'm not sure that's going to be the end-all be-all as it relates to how we have these discussions.
That's correct. And if I may, Madam Chair, the reason that this particular project is being highlighted is that it's on its way to complete the supplemental environmental document. When that report is completed and accepted by the board, that triggers a series of other actions that are going to be, that are going to require funding. And we've identified the funding, but it's going to require us to move and start expending dollars. So that's one of the reasons that a discussion at the March meeting, just to put everyone to level the playing field for everyone participating as to What are these projects? Where are they in the pipeline or of achievement of milestones? And in this one in particular, once we get the supplemental report before the board and get it approved, which was supposed to happen in May, April or May, Carolyn? Once that's approved, that then it's a green light to move forward, and there's some major expenditures that are going to occur as a result. So the conversation, in as much as it's important to have a broader conversation, there are some of these projects that are already out the gate, and if we allow them to continue, then we can't bring them back. We have the conversation of the broader, but we won't be able to bring them back.
Maybe just one recommendation I would make, just listening to you, that makes some sense, that it would also be just helpful, I think, to make sure that we outline the process and all the decision points, because again, it's been a while since we've all voted on significant projects outside of BART, and so that's also probably just really helpful for everybody to just reacquaint themselves with that. So thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
If I may just interject, we're going really off topic, and the environmental document for the EBRC is coming later in a few months, and we shouldn't really be having long discussions about it. And so I just want to remind all on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
No, but I'm going to, in light of that, I'll hold my comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that will take us to items 8.4, and all the minutes and things are items are in your packet or the reading folder, but we did have a card from Mr. Beekman. Did you wish to speak on a couple of these, the committees and the joint power boards?
May I speak to each item or all?
Well, just go ahead.
For each item, I can have a bit of time?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. To speak to your, do I have 2 minutes or?
Yes.
Okay, 2 minutes. To speak to the Capital Committee program, CPC minutes, I was, I still believe that minimal uses of technology and surveillance technology need to be for the east side of San Jose. And it's important to learn how to practice that. I mentioned a few words about not following San Francisco models from the mid-2000s, and that was the same day that Jeff Adachi died, and he was the promoter of that philosophy. And as a person, Jeff Adachi, I think, could be considered close to a hero to myself. If I learned to study him more, I know his heir apparent right now is working. Matt Gonzalez does really incredible work. So I do not want to, I never want to berate Jeff Adachi, but his policies of that time, I just feel are questionable. And as Democrats, as liberal philosophy, I think we have to grow. I think that's what we have to do. So I said what I said. I'm sorry if that has happened, and hopefully we can all grow from experiences like this. I then spoke at the SSTPO, and that was an interesting exercise that there was a NICRIC person there giving a lecture, a talk. I took that time to speak about the college football playoffs, as that's what they were talking about, and the role of San Jose, the city of San Jose in that. And I would like to talk in the upcoming months my concerns of how that whole time was handled. And I hope we can have time and room to do that, and to make clear that this is a VTA, how it can be a VTA issue and a San Jose issue. And about the rail board, I'll talk about that at another time, or the high-speed rail board, I'll talk about it another time. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any announcements from any members of the board?
Yep. I'm always speaking.
Okay, Mr. McAllister.
So this is on Monday. I'm having be in Washington, D.C., meeting with the Department of Transportation Senior Intergovernmental Agency, Chris Mitten, and we're going to be talking about infrastructure, grade crossing, SR 85, anything that comes along the line. So I would appreciate if anybody has tips on how to talk to these people, the department, or lay the groundwork for when the rest of you go down there and talk with the Secretary of Transportation, I'd be greatly appreciated. But so, or if there's a topic that you would like me to present to those, that would be, this is the National League of Cities, so I'm ahead of you guys by a week, I think.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, then that will take us to our closed session. The board will discuss items 9.1.A through 9.1.B during closed session. Okay, the board is now coming back to open session, and Evelyn Tran, General Counsel, will provide the closed session report.
Just the three.
How many to see? Come on, people.
For items 9.1A, 9.1B, there were no reportable actions taken in closed session.
Okay, thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.